The UN Security Council is now being fast-tracked for deployment in early 2026. A look inside the U.S.-led Civil Military Coordination Center in southern Israel, the multinational force, or ISF, is expected to arrive rapidly, now overseeing most humanitarian and security logistics. American troops will not enter Gaza, but U.S. Central Command says they will continue directing aid flow and the implementation of President Trump's 20-point plan from the Israeli side. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the IDF-controlled security zone in southern Syria yesterday, underscoring what he called Israel's immense defensive and offensive importance there as talks with Damascus remain stalled. He arrived with senior officials, including the defense and foreign ministers, the IDF chief of staff, and Israel's ambassador to the United States, touring an IDF outpost, meeting soldiers, and receiving a classified briefing along the volatile frontier. Israel says its forces remain deployed up to 15 kilometers inside Syria to stop weapons from reaching Hezbollah and other hostile groups. Damascus condemned the visit as a serious violation of sovereignty, linking it to President al-Shaara's recent White House meeting, where he criticized Israel's presence in Syria. For now, Israeli officials say no security arrangement with Damascus is close, and Israel will not withdraw without a full peace agreement. Let's hear Netanyahu on site.
אנחנו מייחסים חשיבות עצומה ליכולת שלנו, גם ההגנתית וגם ההתקפית כאן, שמירה על בעלי בריתנו הדרוזים, ועיקר שמירה על מדינת ישראל ועל גבולה הצפוני אל מול גולן. זו משימה שיכולה להתפתח כל רגע.
The Mossad has revealed a major breakthrough with the uncovering of a wide organized Hamas terror network operating across Europe, according to Israel's intelligence agency. A series of coordinated raids in Austria and Germany led to multiple arrests and the seizure of weapons, explosives, and operational materials intended for use on command. Investigators identified Mahmoud Naim, the son of senior Hamas official Bassem Naim, as the key architect of the network. Naim met with his father in Qatar to advance the operation, linking the conspiracy directly to Hamas top leadership. The agency also confirms active involvement of Hamas operatives based in Turkey. Since the October 7th massacre, Hamas has intensified its efforts to build cells, supply lines, and logistic hubs across Europe, strategy that intelligence officials say mimics Iran and its proxies. The Mossad reports it has disrupted dozens of plots over the past year, crediting what it calls close and persistent intelligence cooperation with European partners. Now, as the region enters a new and volatile phase, Israel is now facing escalation on multiple fronts, from Hezbollah and Hamas activity in Lebanon to ceasefire breaches in Gaza to intensifying tensions with Syria and the fast-tracked international force set for deployment in 2026. To help us break down all of these developments, we are now joined by Major in Reserves Avraham Levin of the Alma Research and Education Center and retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, Special Analyst for the Middle East at JCFA and former Chief Analyst at the Israeli Military Intelligence. Thank you very much for joining. Let's start with you. Let's start with you, Jacques. With Lebanon, Israel carried out a major wave of strikes targeting both Hezbollah and Hamas. From your perspective, how significant is this escalation compared to previous months?
Well, you're talking to somebody that sees himself as Cato in the Roman Empire and been pointing all the time at Carthago, Carthago, Carthago. I've been pointing at Hezbollah's efforts since November 2024 to reconstitute its ranks, to recruit new combatants, to replace the commanders that were killed. 2,500 of them were killed during the campaign, and opening again factories for the production of the precision-guided missiles, of drones, and other weapons that are right now smuggled from Syria and other places. And Hezbollah is preparing himself for a long time for a confrontation with Israel. And right now, he doesn't think that this is the time for Hezbollah to fight. It's the time to prepare. And just in case Israel will attack massively, then he is prepared to confront Israel. As they say, they are ready for Karbala syndrome. Karbala syndrome means, in fact, a suicidal attitude of Shia who are ready to die even if they lose the battle. So this is where we stand right now today. And Hezbollah has several fronts to take care. I mean, you're talking about Israel has several fronts. Hezbollah has also several fronts: the Lebanese domestic front, the Syrian front, and the Israeli front. So, I mean, and they are as busy as we are in trying to put themselves on the middle of the political scene in Lebanon and imposing their agenda on the Lebanese government, a failed state, a failed government, a failed army.
Avraham, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I completely agree. I would add that just looking at the attacks on the Israeli side, I do not see a significant escalation. If we follow the numbers of attacks, we've continued attacking all along the past year. We've counted over 650 attacks not only in South Lebanon, but across Lebanon altogether, all attacks against Hezbollah. And I don't see that stopping in the near future. But on the other hand, I do not see a significant escalation either. And it's interesting to try and think, why is there a need to put out there that everything's escalating and everything's getting worse? We're in a stagnant situation, as Jacques Neria said, of preparation on the other side and rehabilitation and local manufacturing, and also a war on perception internally in Lebanon of rebuilding the position of Hezbollah as a strong organization. But I do not see an escalation on our side. I think the only thing that these attacks prove is that Hezbollah is trying to return to South Lebanon and return to the abilities they had before the attack a year ago.
So let me ask you, the IDF says that Hezbollah is rebuilding and rearming. Does Israel have room to be concerned on this front? How likely are Hezbollah to engage in a renewed conflict? We know that Nasrallah and many of their other operatives were eliminated.
Well, I'll give you a parallel. In 2006, after the Lebanon Second War, Hezbollah had around 10 to 15,000 missiles, and Israel conducted since 2006 till 2024 maybe 600, 700 air raids, airstrikes on convoys coming from Syria, on Syrian sites, on Hezbollah sites. And what was the result? The result that instead of having 15,000 missiles, Hezbollah just covered more than 200,000 missiles. So this is what's happening today. You're talking about escalation. All this doesn't stop Hezbollah from rearming, doesn't stop Hezbollah from receiving hundreds of missiles coming from Syria and manufacturing new missiles and new drones. So if escalation has to be, it has certainly has to be resemblant to what was in the last days of the campaign against Hezbollah, where Israel raided more than 1,600 times, 1,600 sorties against Hezbollah targets. And this is where Hezbollah broke and accepted the defeat.
Now, Israel revealed that dozens of the Hezbollah sites hidden in civilian homes, schools, public buildings. What does this show us about their continued terrorist strategy, Avraham?
I don't see anything on this front either.
Nothing.
Hezbollah always used the Lebanese civilians as human shields. They even tried to do it with the Christian residents in South Lebanon and Remesh, for instance. But that's their method. And that's why I want to take it even a step further. While Israel's official policy is saying we don't want Hezbollah back in South Lebanon, I think the policy should be we don't want the people of the towns by the border back, because if they're back, Hezbollah is back. We do not have the ability to differentiate Hezbollah from the civilians. So when UNIFIL visits Bleide, for me, they're visiting a military base called Bleide that Hezbollah is trying to rebuild. When they speak about Beit Lif, I don't see it as a Lebanese village. I see it as a Hezbollah base. Therefore, it will probably be attacked again and again. As long as Hezbollah will try to return, IDF will continue.
I quite agree with this, with the analysis. And I mean, we have to bear in mind that Hezbollah reorganized itself even in South Lebanon, south of the Litani. in every village, you have these intervention squads that have been created by Hezbollah, who replace the combatants, the regular terrorists. They are just they're dressing civilians, but they have all the possibilities of using their weapons against them. And then there's something very, very preoccupying: is the special relation that is being right now established between the army, the Lebanese army, and Hezbollah, to such a point that right now the American administration has had enough of that, and some information has leaked about special relations that exist between the chief of the army, Rodolphe Haikal, and one of the main major, I would think, promoter of Hezbollah in the parliament, Wafiq Safa, and it seems that there's some kind of deals that are being made between the two, whereas Haikal is looking further in 5 years from now to become the next president, exactly what Michel Aoun did in 2006 when he signed the strategic alliance with Hezbollah, and it took him 10 years to be the president of Lebanon. So this is where we stand today, and this is why the Americans have just stopped and asked the Lebanese not to come to Washington, stop the visits, stop all the meetings that were scheduled for this gentleman, and of course threatening that the further aid to the Lebanese army will be under scrutiny much more than in the past, and maybe their investment in the Lebanese army is just a failure.
Now, Lebanon claims these strikes were disproportionate, while Israel argues that it prevented future attacks. My question is, could the Lebanese government really succeed eventually at getting rid of Hezbollah? Is that even possible? Avraham, what do you think?
Well, first of all, a little background about the Lebanese army. As Jacques started speaking, heavily invested by U.S. I think U.S. is not buying.
You might have cut out. Can you hear me, Avraham? Jacques, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Avraham is not with us until he gets back. Maybe you can answer that question. Do you think the Lebanese government can actually get rid of Hezbollah at any point?
Are you seeing a big grin on my face? So this is exactly what the Lebanese government is worth of. This is, as I said, it's a failed government. These are Lebanese. I mean, I don't want to be stereotypical, but they are merchants. Their history is full of sponsorships. Once there were the French, and then there were the British, and after the British there were the Americans, and after the Americans were the Israelis, and then the Syrians, and now they're looking for somebody else to do the job they cannot do themselves. This government is not able to give the order to the army to act against Hezbollah, because the moment they will do that, the army will disintegrate into sectarian units, because this is the way it is built. 60% of the Lebanese army is Shia, and those Shia will not fight the countrymen in the south of Lebanon or in the north. It happens that like in 1975, the moment the army was asked to intervene, the army disintegrated, and there was no more Lebanese army, and it was the door open for civil war. This is what what is expected in Lebanon if the Lebanese government asks the army to intervene against Hezbollah, and it will not do that. They understand that, and Hezbollah is using that, is exploiting the situation in order to impose itself as on the agenda. One, no disarmament. Second, no direct or indirect negotiation with Israel. Third, do not change, please, the electoral system in Lebanon, because it will not fit. And fourthly and lastly is that do not hurt us financially, because this is what the American administration is trying to do, to choke Hezbollah from receiving finance from outside, from Iran and from Africa and other places in South America.
Avraham, you were trying to say?
I think we also have to remember that the worst situation in Lebanon did not happen when Israel is attacking Hezbollah, or in the 80s when Israel was attacking Palestinians. It happened in the years that Jacques just mentioned. in the 70s, a civil war. That's the worst threat that can be. So let's listen together to Naim Qasim when he speaks about his own government, and he says, if the government will lay a hand on our arms, we will go to civil war. He's saying exactly the same thing. I think it's about time we listen and accept the facts. That's Hezbollah, and right now, no one else is taking care of the problem except IDF.
Okay, well, let's moving on to Syria and what's happening there. Prime Minister Netanyahu made a high-profile visit to Israeli-held territory in southern Syria. What message was he trying to send here to Damascus, to Washington, to Hezbollah, in your opinion, Avraham?
Oh, he's definitely sending a message of we're here and we're here to stay. I think it's all part of negotiations. Both Giuliani's jokes about Israeli presence in the Golan Heights and in the 9 posts that we built beyond the Alpha Line, as well as a Netanyahu visit in the Golan Heights and his declaration in the front line, so to speak. And I think it's all part of a negotiation. I'd like to add that there are common goals on the Giuliani side of things and on our side of things. A stable Syria is a common interest, in my opinion. Stopping smuggling that Jacques mentioned before of weapons from Syria to Hezbollah is an effort that we're both taking part of. We take turns, Giuliani and IDF, who will stop the next smuggling from Syria to the Bekaa Valley. And I think there are common interests, and that's a base that we can start working on. Not, I won't go as far as a peace agreement, so Jacques doesn't burst in laughter. But I think a security agreement might be in place in the near future.
Well, Jacques, Israel says that it must stay deployed up to 15 kilometers inside Syria to prevent weapons from reaching Hezbollah. How sustainable is this long term? Could Israel actually remain there?
Well, this is not serious as an argument, because, I mean, the border between Lebanon and Syria is such that weapons can flow from Syria into Lebanon, because there is no border that has been delimited between the two countries since 1946. So there are 6 official place or cross points between Syria and Lebanon, but there are 377 illegal passages where those passages are controlled by families, by tribes, by Hezbollah, with a remote control, opening the fence, closing the fence, closing the door, opening the door. This is what we have. I mean, it's a 500 kilometers of border. This is not something that we, with the 15 kilometers that we have right now in the Golan, I think that we're missing the opportunity. There is an opportunity right now, strategic one, to transform the situation in Syria into the next border of Israel facing Iran. Instead of having the Syrian border and the Iranian presence on our borders, we should look at the borders between Syria and Iraq as our common borders. And this is what we have to discuss right now, a strategic agreement, which is, I mean, right now of interest of the two sides, of both sides. We have that. And I don't think that is wise right now to go into the area that we have just conquered after the 8th of December. This is just, I mean, this is a gimmick. There's nothing serious in that. And we've seen that there are discussions in Azerbaijan, in the Emiratis, and in the Golan between the Israeli officials and Syrian officials, and we might be very close to an agreement. And I think that this agreement is something very important, of utmost importance for Israel's strategy in the Middle East.
So President al-Shaara's Washington visit with Trump, what can we assume would be the result of that trip now on the ground? Is there a connection between, what's happening now and that visit that was just recently?
Well, the Ahmad al-Shaara visit to Washington was meant first and foremost to just alleviate the sanctions on Syria. Because as long as these sanctions exist, no money will flow into Syria from investments from Europe or from the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, will not happen. And this was one of the major goals of the visit. And certainly, I mean, Ahmadinejad has posed himself, has put himself in a situation where he tells the Americans, I have changed camps. I am no more in the negative camps. I'm not in the resistance axis of Iran. I am on the other side. I'm with you. And I think that from the Trump administration point of view, I mean, if you look at the map, I mean, the map that is behind Abraham, see that the American influence begins in Turkey, goes to Syria, goes to Iraq, and further down to Saudi Arabia. This is a big change in the area. This is not this didn't have any precedent in the past. And this is a new situation, and the Syrians are using it in order to get some a major assistance from the United States. Would you be surprised if tomorrow morning Donald Trump will agree to give a $1 trillion loan to Syria? I don't think that this would be a surprise.
I think we can add to that. First of all, I don't think there's anyone in Israel that's against the Syrian people having a better life. The other thing I'd like to add is that I think the bigger threats on Julani or Ashara, I sort of like his older name better as a resident of the Golan Heights. I'll remember his jihadist nickname a little longer than others, but I think his threat, his problem is more internal than external. Externally, he's doing very well. He visited Russia, he visited Trump, he's bringing in forces from all over. I think internally there's a long way to go before we have a stable neighbor that we can count on as an ally. And I think that's a step that bringing in clear American support helps him immensely in showing he's affecting change and in bringing together all the different forces that he's trying to keep together as a coalition after he took down Assad.
Yeah, I think Abraham is right concerning the internal situation. If you look at what's happening in Syria lately, at least 4 attempts to kill Jolani or Ahmadinejad has been registered lately. I mean, and these are, part of them are Hezbollah cells, and part of them are Iranian cells. And there are also those internal, those domestic elements that were part of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the organization that took over Syria, and they don't agree very much with the policy concerning Israel. We remember very well the fact when in Sueda there was this attack, this horrendous attack against the Druze, that some of the combatants there who just came from Damascus just expressed themselves that said the next target is Jerusalem. So I mean, this is something that he has to fight against. And right now, as much as we know, he is trying to eliminate all those who are in the opposition. He's doing it. He's doing quite a job. But it doesn't mean that this is the end of it. Alawites are still there. The Druze are still there. There are some news about the collaborator Al-Bal'ous, who has been attacked and an attempt on his life. The Kurds that the problem with the Kurds that has not been solved. And as Abraham said, as long as the situation is unstable, Israel cannot live with instability. Israel would prefer stability. And in this realm, this is why I think the American presence, if there is an American air base south of Damascus, it would be, I mean, a revolution. And if this happens, this means that Ahmadinejad Jolani is ready to put himself in danger in order to assure the consolidation and the stability of his regime.
Well, I can keep going on and talking about this for a very long time, but we're just about to finish the show. And just before we do, I want to ask you about Gaza. Just one question. Hamas fired on Israeli troops inside the Israeli-controlled zone, and the IDF responded heavily. Could this risk the U.S. brokered truce, or are these just small hiccups along the way? Avram, what do you think?
Oh, I think IDF is still working all across the yellow line. And I think this will happen more than we would hope. And I hope it's just an hiccup. But on the other hand, I'm not sure phase 2 is feasible anyway. And I don't see any disarmament of Hamas. So it doesn't really matter if this is a hiccup or a big problem, because I don't see Hamas leaving their weapons behind anytime in the near future.
if you're waiting for my response, I think that the decision on Gaza has been taken from Israel. Now it is being concentrated in the Kiryat Gat, the headquarters of the American international force, and all what we are hearing and seeing is, as Abraham said, hiccups. There's nothing serious. I mean, I don't see the Israeli army invading invading Gaza. This is over. The war is over. Now the question is, how do we implement the second stage? And it will take some time, but definitely the basic war is over.
And you don't think that, you think it's a possibility we may not reach the second stage?
It could be. It could be. We could stay where we are today, and I don't think that this is a situation that the Americans would accept. I think that we'll do whatever they want. We have to wait and see, as you said, that if the Indonesians and the Kazakhstanis and others, the Azeris, are coming or not coming. I mean, we just read yesterday that the U.S. administration spoke about that with Yemen. So I mean, we don't know what sort of army will come there. But at the moment, you will have a foreign army presence in Gaza. This is the end of Israeli intervention inside Gaza.
Avraham, final words about this?
No, I'd rather not comment more. I think Jacques explained exactly the situation. And as someone that will go back to the reserves, to the southern front, I'd rather keep things at that. Thank you.
All right. Well, Avraham Levin and Jacques Neria, thank you very much, both of you, for this input.
You're welcome.
Great day.
Now that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. We're here every hour on the hour with the latest breaking developments, in-depth reports, and exclusive insights into the stories shaping the region and the world. Stay with us throughout the day for our next edition of ILTV on the Hour. We'll be here as events continue to unfold. Scan the QR code for our app. Until then, I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Khaled Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. The United Nations Security Council approves the U.S. proposal for creating an international force to provide security for Gaza and a board of peace to oversee its governance until at least 2027. The plan also includes reference to a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. 2 Palestinian terrorists carry out an attack at the Gush Etzion junction south of Jerusalem, ramming a car into pedestrians, followed by a stabbing rampage. One man, 71-year-old Aaron Cohn, is killed and 3 others suffer serious to moderate injuries before the terrorists are neutralized by security forces at the scene. Prime Minister Netanyahu condemns the upsurge in violence directed against Palestinians in Judea and Samaria by Israeli extremists, saying he views these actions with great severity and calling on law enforcement authorities to deal with the rioters to the fullest extent of the law. The IDF hits a Hamas compound in the Ain el-Hilweh area of South Lebanon, used as a training and preparation site for terror attacks against Israel. Lebanese sources say at least 13 killed in the strike. In another airstrike, the IDF eliminates 2 Hezbollah terrorists engaged in trying to rebuild the movement's military capabilities in the Binchbel and Blida areas of South Lebanon. Germany rescinds the suspension of some weapons sales to Israel it imposed last summer over concerns on how the Gaza war was being waged. Germany, the second biggest international supplier of arms to Israel, says the step is contingent on the ceasefire being maintained and the influx of aid to Gaza increasing. And now our big story. With the UN Security Council approving the Trump administration's post-war plans for Gaza, the path is clear for it to move forward. But some big questions remain, especially on areas of concern for Israel. Which nations will contribute forces to the Gaza Security Force? And will it have the authority or will to carry out the disarming of Hamas? And if not, who will? What exactly are the reforms the Palestinian Authority has to carry out to have a role in Gaza? And when and where will political talks begin on that and a political horizon for the Palestinians? Well, let's hear some reactions from the U.S. and Hamas to the UN vote.
Per the carefully negotiated language in the 20-point plan, this resolution charts a possible pathway for Palestinian self-determination after the Palestinian Authority has completed the necessary reforms, where rockets will give way to olive branches and there is a chance to agree on a political horizon. It dismantles Hamas's grip. It ensures Gaza rises free from terror's shadow, prosperous and secure.
هذا القرار تبنى بالكامل الموقف الإسرائيلي وتغاضى نهائيا عن الموقف الفلسطيني وعن مصلحة شعبنا الفلسطيني هنا في قطاع غزة، وأن نتنياهو لا يريد الاستمرار في اتفاق وقف إطلاق النار، إنما يريد فرض رؤيته على قطاع غزة وعلى المنطقة بأكملها.
And joining us for more in studio, we have Reserves IDF Brigadier General Amir Avivi. He's the chairman and founder of the Israel and Defense and Security Forum, the Bitronistim. And from Washington, we have David Markovsky, distinguished fellow and director of the Korat Project on Arab-Israeli relations at the Washington Institute of Near East Policy. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Amir, I'll start with you. The plan that was approved in the UN is basically the Trump plan that was presented earlier this year, but the context is different. There have been developments on the ground that raise more concerns for Israel, the disarmament of Hamas, in particular, what's happening in Gaza. Your reaction to at least the sort of vision that the U.S. seems to think it holds out?
First, we all agree Hamas needs to lay down their weapons and get out of Gaza. Gaza needs to be disarmed. Realistically speaking, no outside force is going to do that. I don't see any coalition that will go in and fight Hamas. So the agreement enables Israel to do the job, and eventually this is exactly what will happen. It's imminent that Israel will go in and destroy Hamas. We might give some time to the U.S. to try to build an alternative, but realistically speaking, I don't see any force that can disarm Hamas but the IDF.
Well, I want to get your reaction, David, to that, because there is a feeling, certainly among many in Israel, that ultimately Israel is going to have to be the one to take on Hamas. But what consequences would that have for the Trump vision as presented in the plan as regards Gaza and more so even in the Middle East?
Look, I think it's always good to be with you, Kalev. Thank you for having me. I think we're in early days in Gaza. And the media discourse is going to change. We're still in the early days, but we're really talking about two Gazas. There's the green zone of Gaza, which is the 53% where Israel is, up to a yellow line, which is actually eastern Gaza. And then there's the red zone, the 47% where Hamas is still dominant with their weapons, and that's western Gaza. Most of the population is actually on the Hamas side. I think the International Stabilization Force is going to operate largely on the Israeli side. Nobody is going in. I agree with Aviv. And the media has not really focused on this enough. The ISF is not going to go forcibly disarm Hamas. This whole theory is based on Hamas willfully disarming, but they're not going to disarm. And so I agree with Aviv, whatever Israel doesn't do doesn't get done. Now, it doesn't mean the war is going to restart and it's going to have the high intensity like the attacks on Gaza City. I tend to think it's going to be below the radar, raids in and out where needed, where Israel thinks there's about to be an attack in the green zone. But I think we're talking about, I know people will laughingly call, so this is the two-state solution, David, in Gaza. But it's two Gazas for now. That's why the Security Council resolution was so important for the Arabs, because they understood this was coming, and they needed some sort of international imprimatur that would give them the sense of working basically in the Israeli zone. So we are heading into, I think, a very messy period. I think people should buckle their seatbelts and put the tray tables in the upright positions, because I think it could be turbulent, because Hamas has every interest in sabotaging within the green zone. And we'll see. I mean, the theory of the case is, as this succeeds and you start having housing in Rafah and things like that, maybe you could expand the green zone and shrink the Hamas zone. But that's not where we are right now yet.
Amir, a messy period. I mean, even on the scenario described, we would still see, as David says, perhaps this ISF force, Arab Muslim soldiers in the Israeli zone. We have the U.S. also asserting some kind of authority from its command center. It's set out in Kiryat Gat. Is the IDF and other security forces of Israel going to be able to operate in that kind of environment to do the job you're talking about?
The problem at present is that Hamas is continuously attacking IDF forces on the yellow line. They want to kidnap soldiers. They want to renew the attacks. We cannot wait for long, because at the end of the day, when you are on the defense and they are constantly attacking, at a certain point they will score. And we cannot afford this. We cannot afford this reality. The chief of staff visited the troops in Gaza and said we have to get ready to renew the offensive and get the job done. Now, from a military point of view, you cannot dismantle Hamas by doing raids. If the goal, the goal is to dismantle Hamas and to demilitarize the Gaza Strip, the IDF will have to maneuver, will have to go. I'm not saying that in order to bring Hamas to the point where they say, that's it, okay, we understand, we're laying down our weapons, give us a corridor outside of Gaza, you need to necessarily conquer everything. But I do think that we'll have to do a maneuver, not raids. We'll have to go in and bring Hamas to the point where they say, okay, it's game over. And then they will have two choices. Either completely be destroyed, or say, okay, we understand, you are serious about it, we are laying down our weapons, give us the opportunity to get out of Gaza and create this corridor to the Sinai Peninsula and get them out.
Another aspect, David, of the plan, and we heard the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, speak about it, is this sort of path to self-determination for the Palestinians. There are some here in Israel who think that maybe that's something of a fig leaf for the more moderate Arab states. How serious is the Trump administration about moving forward on that, even though we know that could cause political problems for Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Right. If I could, just 1 second, just for our listeners, our viewers, I think what Aviv said, and this is going to be the core tension between the U.S. and Israel going forward, Kalev, is that Aviv's might be right on a technical military level about going into the red zone, but this is going to be a recipe for friction if it's anything more than raids right now. And this is where I worry about the U.S.-Israel relationship, because the military requirements might be to keep pushing more in the red zone. And yet I think Netanyahu has made some commitments to Trump about this. And so I think raids is going to be the middle point. But I don't know. I think this is we're putting our finger now on key American-Israeli tension going forward. Now, your point about the reforms and all that. Look, well, we'll see. I mean, it was a way of, I think, squaring a circle of trying to say, look, to have negotiations on two states, we'll deal with this later after the PA reforms. We're not exactly precise on what it means to reform. Is this elections? Is this anti-corruption measures? Is this institutional changes of personnel on the Palestinian side? It's all very vague right now. I don't think it's immediate. It's a way of also trying to square the circle, not just on whether there'll be negotiations on two states, which there won't be because the PA hasn't reformed, but because within the coalition of Netanyahu, the word PA is a dirty word and it's a red flag. Right. But for the Arab world, it's essential that the PA is key. So they're trying to square that circle by saying it is PA, but it's not this PA, and it's not now PA, and we'll deal with it later. So I think it's just a way for everyone to save face, even though I personally think it would be important to empower them, because at the end of the day, the ISF won't do any of this. And Israel has had 30 years of experience of security cooperation with the PA in the West Bank. that I think it could draw upon.
Well,
I think the issue of reform is not a here and now question for now, because Israel is not integrating the PA anyway.
Amir, certainly in Israel, more skepticism about that squaring that circle with the PA.
Yeah, no, there is not going to be any PA in the Gaza Strip in no form. But I want to present a different view about the interests of Israel and the U.S. I think both leaders want to reach elections in less than a year after having won decisively the war and after bringing peace agreements. And the question is, how dependent are these peace agreements on winning in Gaza? And I think there is a connection. You cannot really move to normalization without ending the war in Gaza. And if you have to renew maneuver, this is not ending the war. So I would assume logically that it should be both sides' interest, the U.S. and Israel, to win as faster as possible, to do a fast maneuver and bring down Hamas in order to be able to move on time to regional global peace agreements that will be signed. And if you work along the idea of raids, this will not end. It can take years. Now, I don't think, from an Israeli point of view, that Prime Minister Netanyahu can reach the next elections and say, I haven't reached the goals of war. I haven't dismantled Hamas. I haven't demilitarized Gaza. I haven't brought a different government, and you cannot create anything in Gaza without dismantling Hamas first. So I think we don't have a lot of time. We have maybe 2 or 3 months to get the job done in Gaza and then move towards this regional global peace agreement.
Well, that is a pretty tight deadline, Amir.
It is. It's challenging.
But another aspect of the Israel-U.S. relationship and a big part of the shifting Mideast landscape is this intensifying strategic alliance between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. Now, President Trump rolled out the red carpet for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the White House, confirming the sale of the advanced F-35 fighter jets to the kingdom, as well as announcing a new defense pact with what Trump called a major non-NATO ally of the U.S. Here's President Trump.
And the defense agreement, have you reached agreement on that? We pretty much have.
Quick question for the Crown Prince, if I could just finish.
We have reached agreement on that. Okay.
You said you are planning to sell the F-35 jets to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Is it part of the security agreement? And how you assess the defense partnership between Saudi Arabia and the United States? And the question was...
Well, I just said it, though. I mean, we're going to sell them F-35s. That's the end of the question, I guess.
Is it part of the security agreement or no?
No, we're going to have a deal. They're going to purchase F-35s. They're buying them from Lockheed, and it's a great plane. We make, by the way, the best military equipment. You saw that during the Iran little skirmish. We make the best planes, the best missiles. We make the best offensive missiles. We make the best military equipment in the world.
Nice.
David, Amir Vivi was talking earlier about coming to these regional alliances, perhaps after a Gaza operation, but there was some anticipation, even in Israel, that at this meeting we would see some advancement towards maybe Saudis moving towards the Abraham Accords, maybe some kind of pan-Middle East security arrangement. That didn't happen. So how much was this, in a sense, a bit of a win for the Saudis and maybe to some degree to the detriment of Israel?
No, I think it's a great question, and I think there's something to what you're saying, because indeed, the Saudis got a lot of what they wanted. Yes, this is not a treaty. You need 2/3 of the Senate for the treaty, and that will only happen with normalization. So it's an executive order like the U.S. signed with Qatar, as both countries are fearful that there's going to be another Israel-Iran round in the next few years. But it's an executive order. It leaves with Trump in theory. So. But you're right that it's a win for them there. The announcement on the F-35s, the announcement on the civil nuclear, even if the United States is going to be in charge of the uranium on Saudi soil, what about in 20 years from now? Will they kick out the United States? It's unclear what the U.S. got. I know what commentators will say. Well, the U.S. got $1 trillion, according to the president. It started as $600 billion. There'll be $1 trillion in Saudi investments in AI and artificial intelligence. But I think for Israel, it's a lot of the cards that would have been used in what I call the Super Bowl of all peace agreements with Saudi normalization. So to some extent, you wonder if it dilutes the Saudi interest in a deal, even though, again, getting a treaty is permanent, like NATO. And this is not permanent. This is an executive order. It leaves with Trump. or could leave with Trump. So, I think you asked the right question, which is the Saudis they're looking great for their perspective, but from an American angle, have we really gotten enough for this visit? I think it's a very fair point.
Well, let's look at the Israeli angle, Amir. Now, obviously, or perhaps for diplomatic reasons, Prime Minister Netanyahu is not going to publicly object, but the Israel Air Force releasing and making it clear in a strategic document that the sale of the F-35s is a challenge for Israel. It does erode the qualitative edge. How should Israel be reacting to these events?
Well, we had the same event in 2020. The U.S. announced that it's selling F-35 to the United Emirates. Until now, no F-35.
But that was perceived as return for the UAE going into the Abraham Accords.
Our expectation, obviously, is that if you are going to give them F-35, and we can keep quality advantage even if they get F-35, okay? It has to be for normalization. Executive order for normalization. Doesn't make sense giving the Saudis prices without them giving what they need to give, and they need to give normalization. So this is the Israeli expectation, and we hope that this will happen. Now, I don't know what good does it do to the Saudi Arabia just to have an executive order. Look, they understood in Obama's time, when the U.S. stopped being dependent on Middle Eastern oil, that the U.S. is not going to be necessarily aligned with them in the long term. Now it depends who the president is. One president is against Saudi Arabia, the other one is for Saudi Arabia. They need a treaty. They're not going to get a treaty without normalization. So I think it's their interest to move towards normalization for many, many reasons. It also has to do with the vision of, the new trade routes connecting India to UAE. It's connecting the pipes of Saudi Arabia of oil directly to Israel and bypassing, Hormuz Straits and Bab el-Mandab. There are many, many common interests. So my expectation is to see in the coming year Saudis moving towards normalization and pushing towards a treaty.
I want to ask then, David, that is the Israeli expectation, that this will lead to normalization. But to relate it back to our previous discussion, the Saudis, again, making clear they want to see movement on the Palestinian issue towards statehood, certainly problematic for the current government.
Right. So look, here there's some timetable questions. And this links up to your question. I think really, Kalev, the issue of the planes, first of all, has to get congressional approval, because under congressional law, there's such a thing called QME, the Qualitative Military Edge of Israel. And Congress has to approve that. Trump can't do that on his own. So I wonder in practice if the F-35s will be linked to normalization. But for the Saudi side, normalization is linked to what you said, which is what they call, a clear pathway, which is like a code word for serious negotiations on the two states. This government can't do it in Israel. No way. And Aviv will be the first one to say it. So, what we're really seeing is that the can is going to be kicked down the road beyond the Israeli election. And I'm sure Netanyahu has told Trump, look, you're president till 2028. There's time. And I can't do it with this government. We'll see how the elections turn out. And, politicians, not just in Israel, to be fair to Israelis, in every country, they like it both ways. And so Trump, I'm sure Bibi will run in this election, and he will say, Trump is my best friend. Both MBS, Trump, me, we all want normalization. Yes, now they're saying Palestinians, negotiation. I can't agree to that. But say, just trust me, after the election, we will smooth it over. And so I think that's the way it is. This is actually a post-Israeli election issue, the normalization deal. Nothing can happen between now and then, in my view. The Saudis can't back down, and Bibi can't back down. Trump wants his Nobel Prize, and he believes in it, to be fair to him. But I think this issue is going to have to wait.
All right, gentlemen. Henry Kissinger once famously said Israel has no foreign policy, just local politics. And understandably, upcoming elections, which Prime Minister Netanyahu for the first time really acknowledged that next year is an election year, that will play a big factor going forward. I want to thank General Avivi.
Thank you.
David Makovsky, gentlemen, thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
Delighted.
Thank you.
Delighted to be with you.
And now a final word. During the 1980s, Israel and its supporters in the U.S. waged a public lobbying campaign against the Reagan administration's plans to sell AWACS Raider surveillance planes to Saudi Arabia. Concerned they would provide the Saudis with a qualitative edge in airborne intelligence gathering. Israel lost that battle, although the IDF was able to ultimately trump any advantage gained by the Saudis through its own technological advances. But Israel's real loss in the AWACS fight may have been more diplomatic than military. The Reagan administration, perhaps emboldened by showing it could weather the storm, overtaking a politically unpopular stance on Israel despite opposition in Congress and the American Jewish community, would later do the same thing by recognizing the PLO and starting an official dialogue with it, the first real step down the road to the Oslo Accords. Now the current Republican administration is mulling another arms sale to Riyadh, this of F-35s, which again raises concerns of the qualitative military edge they may provide the Saudis in an even more significant manner than the AWACS sale. But yet again, it is the political ramifications of this arms deal that may prove more significant than any direct strategic consequences. Now, when the AWACS deal was first announced, AIPAC and other U.S. pro-Israel groups forcefully spoke out against it, as did their bipartisan allies in Congress. In contrast, the reaction against the F-35 sale is far more muted, with Israel not wanting to antagonize a now indispensable ally in President Trump, Republicans less willing to challenge their leader, Democrats no longer enthusiastic in backing any Israeli position, and the American Jewish community perhaps wary of opposing the administration at a time when it feels in a more vulnerable position. Now, there is an argument to be made that Israel could see some ancillary benefits from the F-35 sale, such as progress towards normalization of Saudi ties with Israel, a lessening in U.S. pressure on Israel re the Palestinian issue, or the creation of a joint Mideast security force, including the Saudis, that could help counter Iran. However, apparently none of those were preconditions for the deal, and all are political and diplomatic steps that can be reversed by future U.S. governments, or even this one. In contrast, though, the delivery of a game-changing weapon into the hands of the Saudis, potentially changing the balance of power in the region, is something that cannot be undone. There are some real lessons here for this Israeli government and its successors. Now, these include the importance of restoring and reinforcing at least some of the bipartisan support Israel once enjoyed in Washington. There should be a focus on decision-making with more emphasis on long-range strategic consequences rather than shorter-term political considerations. And, of course, the need for Jerusalem to build stronger alliances, even regionally, rather than rely too much on the largesse of Washington. Now, history has shown, as it did with the AWACS, that Israel has the capability to overcome any advances on the battlefield made by its Mideast neighbors. But it cannot ignore the real challenges to its future security that are likely to be posed by the changing political scene in the U.S. and the shifting diplomatic landscape in this region and beyond. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. At ILTV, we're not just reporting the news, we're on a mission. Every story we tell stands for truth, for Zionism, and for Israel. When you subscribe, you're not just buying an app, you're becoming a partner in strengthening Israel's voice around the world. ILTV is factual, direct, and unapologetically pro-Israel, and we need you with us. Scan the QR code on your screen right now to subscribe and stand with Israel. Because this isn't just news, it's a mission. South Africa is raising alarm over 2 recent charter flights carrying more than 300 Palestinians from Gaza, Judea, and Samaria. The Foreign Ministry claimed the arrivals are suspicious and part of what they call a clear agenda to cleanse Palestinians out of the region. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The passengers arrived in Johannesburg without Israeli departure stamps, leading South African authorities to hold one flight on the tarmac for 12 hours before granting entry. Reports in the South African media allege that a shadowy organization known as Al-Majd was involved in organizing the departures of both groups.
It does look like it represents a broader agenda to remove Palestinians from Palestine into many different parts of the world, and it's a clearly orchestrated operation. Because they are not only being sent to South Africa, there are other countries where such flights have been sent. So indeed, it's a matter that is being investigated, and we do not want any further flights to come our way.
Israel rejected the allegations of any wrongdoing. Kogat says the Palestinians have valid South African visas and that Israel simply facilitates exits for those who arrange third country resettlement. The Prime Minister's office had this to say.
South Africa's government has raised concerns about the arrival of a plane load of Palestinians from Gaza, with officials there saying the matter was under investigation. Steve, I'm reading the remaining response in question that you have here, specifically talking about Palestinians ending up in South Africa. I don't have much I can share with you on that, but the Prime Minister has made it clear that if Palestinians want to leave, they should be allowed to leave the Gaza Strip. And if they want to come back to the Gaza Strip, they should also be allowed to come back.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect, thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Sivan Raviv, and here's your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. In a sharp escalation on Israel's northern front, the IDF has carried out a series of targeted strikes across southern Lebanon, eliminating multiple Hezbollah and Hamas operatives. In At-Tiri, the military says it killed a Hezbollah figure responsible for the rebuilding of the group's readiness, a direct violation of post-war agreements. And in the village of Beit Lif, the IDF says Hezbollah has been actively re-establishing terror infrastructure in a blatant breach of the ceasefire understandings. IDF troops working with Northern Command and the Intelligence Directorate identified dozens of sites, including headquarters, weapons storage facilities, and operational posts hidden inside civilian homes and next to schools and public buildings. Israel says these locations were previously reported to the international mechanism but were not addressed. Earlier in the day, 2 more operatives were eliminated in the Bint Jbeil and Blida regions while attempting to rebuild terror assets and gather intelligence on IDF troops. And in a separate operation, the Air Force struck a Hamas training compound inside the Ein el-Hilweh camp, a site Israel says was used to prepare attacks on IDF soldiers. Lebanese reports say 13 were killed. Israel says the facility was under long-term surveillance and hit with precision munitions. The IDF says it will continue operating anywhere in Lebanon to remove emerging threats and will not allow Hezbollah or Hamas to rebuild the capabilities that triggered last year's war. Amid the ceasefire in Gaza, Israeli forces operating inside the IDF-held security zone in southern Gaza came under fire by Hamas operatives, prompting a swift Israeli response. The shooting occurred east of the Yellow Line, clearly within the area designated as Israeli-controlled under the truce. No IDF soldiers were injured, but the military says the attack is a direct violation of the agreement. Within minutes, the Israeli Air Force launched a series of strikes across Gaza. Palestinian reports describe hits in Gaza City's Zaytun neighborhood and near Han Yunis, while the IDF says every target struck was tied to the cell responsible for the attack. Gaza officials report at least 24 killed. Israel says all locations targeted were legitimate Hamas military sites embedded inside civilian areas and warns the ceasefire cannot hold if Hamas continues to fire on its troops. Repeated shooting incidents in recent days have fueled concerns over the stability of the U.S.-brokered truce, the first stage of President Donald Trump's 20-point Gaza plan. Israel says it will meet every attack with an immediate and forceful response. A senior U.S. official confirms that formation of the International Security Force for Gaza, approved by the UN Security Council last week, is now being fast-tracked for deployment in early 2026. The multinational force, or ISF, is expected to arrive in the Strip in the first months of the year, with Azerbaijan and Indonesia emerging as the most likely contributors. Training has yet to begin, and funding remains a major challenge, with Arab and European states being urged to step in. Meanwhile, the U.S.-led Civil Military Coordination Center in Kiryat Gat is expanding rapidly, now overseeing most humanitarian and security logistics. American troops will not enter Gaza, but U.S. Central Command says they will continue directing aid flow and the implementation of President Trump's 20-point Gaza plan from the Israeli side. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the IDF-controlled security zone inside southern Syria yesterday, underscoring what he called Israel's immense defensive and offensive importance there as talks with Damascus remain stalled. He arrived with senior officials, including the defense and foreign ministers, the IDF chief of staff, and Israel's ambassador to the United States, touring an IDF outpost, meeting soldiers, and receiving a classified briefing along the volatile frontier. Israel says its forces remain deployed up to 15 kilometers inside Syria to stop weapons from reaching Hezbollah and other hostile groups. Damascus condemned the visit as a serious violation of sovereignty, linking it to President al-Shaara's recent White House meeting, where he criticized Israel's presence in Syria. For now, Israeli officials say no security arrangement with Damascus is close, and Israel will not withdraw without a full peace agreement. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East, and you can also catch us on our ILTV app. I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching. Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Sivan Raviv, and coming up in today's newscast. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman tells President Trump Saudi Arabia is ready for the Abraham Accords, but only with a real path to Palestinian statehood. The IDF is on high alert after the deadly Gush Etzion terror attack, which killed 1 Israeli and injured 3. And the IDF strikes a Hamas training camp in Lebanon in a deadly attack. The White House meetings between U.S. President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman yielded a security pact and potentially $1 trillion in deals between the two nations that Trump described as great allies. The meetings also yielded an MBS declaration to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel once there's a clear pathway to Palestinian statehood. More on this from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
During last night's lavish White House dinner honoring the Saudi Crown Prince, President Donald Trump said the new U.S.-led Board of Peace, which will oversee Gaza for the next 2 years, is expected to include the heads of many of the world's most influential countries, potentially including the Saudis. The remarks came just 1 day after a UN Security Council resolution granted the U.S.-led board broad authorities to manage Gaza until the end of 2027. Trump thanked the Crown Prince for his role in securing last month's ceasefire and said Gaza is getting very close to being perfected. Trump declared that Saudi Arabia will be formally designated a major non-NATO ally of the United States, a status granted to only 19 other countries. The White House also confirmed that the United States and Saudi Arabia have signed agreements on civil nuclear energy and a massive defense package, including future sales of F-35 advanced fighter jets. Earlier, MBS said Riyadh wants to join the Abraham Accords, but only if there is a clear path toward a two-state solution.
So definitely, we believe having a good relation with all Middle Eastern countries is a good thing, and we want to be part of the Abraham Accord. But we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path of two-state solution. And today we have a healthy discussion with Mr. President that we're going to work on that to be sure that we can prepare the right situation as soon as possible to have that.
I think we're, I don't want to use the word commitment, but we've had a very good talk on the Abraham Accords. We talked about one state, two state. We talked about a lot of things in a short period of time. We'll be discussing it further too. But I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want peace for the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want them to coexist peacefully in the region. And we will do our best to reach that day.
President Trump said the F-35 fighter jets being sold to Saudi Arabia are pretty similar to the models sold to Israel. When asked about Israel's qualitative military edge, Trump said both countries are great allies and deserve top-of-the-line equipment. On reports that Israel conditioned the sale on Saudi normalization, Trump said Israel is aware and they're going to be very happy.
We're going to sell them F-35s. That's the end of the question, I guess.
So the security agreements or no?
No, we're going to have a deal. They're going to purchase F-35s. They're buying them from Lockheed, and it's a great plane. We make, by the way, the best military equipment. You saw that during the Iran little skirmish. We make the best planes, the best missiles. We make the best offensive missiles. We make the best military equipment in the world.
The IDF is formally objecting to a possible U.S. sale of F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, warning it could threaten Israel's qualitative military edge. An Air Force position paper said Israel's long-range operations depend on exclusive access to the jet. Saudi deployment of identical aircraft could undercut that advantage.
Now, a deadly terror attack took place in Judea yesterday, a combined ramming and stabbing attack at the Gush Etzion junction, which has left one man dead and 3 others wounded. More on this tragic news from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
71-year-old Kiryat Arba resident Aharon Cohn was killed on Tuesday in a brutal terror attack at the Gush Etzion junction in Judea. 3 others, a woman in her 40s, a 30-year-old man, and a 15-year-old boy, were wounded when 2 Palestinian terrorists rammed their vehicle into civilians and then attempted to stab them. Cohn was laid to rest last night in his hometown. A widower, he leaves behind 6 children and many grandchildren. According to the IDF and eyewitnesses, the terrorists, identified as 18-year-old Ibrahim Imram al-Atrash of Hebron and 18-year-old Walid Muhammad Khalil Sabarne of Beit Umar, arrived by car, accelerated into people standing near the junction, and then exited the vehicle with knives. Nearby IDF reservists reacted instantly, shooting and killing both attackers. Inside the terrorist car, security forces later discovered explosive materials, which were neutralized by border police bomb disposal units. Palestinian Islamic Jihad praised the attack, calling on Palestinians to escalate violence. Hamas called it a, quote, natural response, though neither group formally claimed responsibility. Medics from Magen David Adom described the chaotic scene as a serious and complex incident. Highway 60, which had been sealed off, reopened roughly 3 hours after the attack. Gush Etzion spokesperson Akiva Spiegelman said the swift response prevented an even greater tragedy. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night condemned the attack. He said in a statement, "Today we experienced another Palestinian terror attack, and we are determined to complete the war on all fronts, including disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, to ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a greater danger." In the meantime, the IDF continues to secure nearby towns and roadways as the investigation unfolds.
We are now joined by Lieutenant Colonel and Reserves Advocate Maurice Hirsch from Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs to break down these latest current events. Thank you, Maurice, for joining.
Hey, good afternoon, Holly.
Good afternoon. So, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told President Trump that Saudi Arabia wants to join the Abraham Accords, but only with a credible pathway to a Palestinian state. Is there a shift in tone here from Riyadh, and how significant is it?
I think there is definitely a shift in really the recognition that joining the Abraham Accords, making peace as part of the Middle East, is something which is in Saudi Arabia's best interest, and not only for Israel's best interest. I feel that what they're saying, that they want a real path to Palestinian statehood, is really, again, putting their own best interests in the hands of the latest Palestinian terrorist/rejectionist. And it's something which they may be paying that lip service to say, you know what, we have to say this. And that's what I hope, that they're just saying that, but they don't really mean it, because otherwise they will never be able to join the Abraham Accords, because there will never be a Palestinian leader that will actually be able to stand up and to say, you know what, we've given up on our desire to destroy Israel. So that's a really, what maybe one, like a tango, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Very interesting. Now, Israel has not yet responded formally to MBS's comments. How do you expect Jerusalem to navigate demands for a credible pathway to Palestinian statehood while obviously safeguarding its own red lines?
I think it's important for Israel to say that at the moment, and whilst the Palestinian society remains indoctrinated, brainwashed, and hate-filled, and seeks Israel's destruction, there is nothing to talk about a Palestinian state. When we see the implementation of the reforms that President Trump has talked about for many years, that are now part of the UN Security Council resolution, that the JCFA is trying to talk about, well, what reforms need to be actually done and implemented in the Palestinian Authority in order to make it into a body that does not educate to hate, that no longer rewards terrorism. We saw the fake decree back in February that Mahmoud Abbas said, we're abandoning our pay-for-slay policy. And now just recently, a few days ago, he fires his Minister of Finance for continuing to pay the salaries to terrorists. Does he not know what is going on? This is just one big, very, very poor joke at the expense of the international community that seems hell-bent on buying these lies every single time. But these are the reforms that need to be implemented before there can be any discussion of whether there should or shouldn't be a Palestinian state.
Now, reports say that President Trump may offer Saudi Arabia F-35 fighter jets as part of a wider strategic package. Israeli defense officials warn that this could undermine Israel's regional air superiority. Is this a real concern, in your opinion?
This is 100% a real concern. Israel's ability to combat and to repel its neighbors has been based on its not only quantitative but qualitative, predominantly qualitative edge. And by providing the F-35s to the Saudi Arabians, we're bringing them up at least 4 or 5 steps closer to us. Our F-35s are obviously amended and improved by the Israeli technology. I think we're the only country that's actually been given that permission to make improvements into that system. So whatever it is, our machinery will still be superior to the basic Lockheed Martin version of the F-35, but it still is a major jump for the Saudis if they were to get these F-35s.
Maurice Hirsch, thank you very much for this input.
Thank you very much for having me.
At ILTV, we're not just reporting the news, we're on a mission. Every story we tell stands for truth, for Zionism, and for Israel. When you subscribe, you're not just buying an app, you're becoming a partner in strengthening Israel's voice around the world. ILTV is factual, direct, and unapologetically pro-Israel. And we need you with us. Scan the QR code on your screen right now and subscribe and stand with Israel, because this isn't just news, it's a mission. The IDF issued an evacuation notice for southern Lebanon residents ahead of a planned attack against Hezbollah infrastructure. This follows an Israeli drone strike earlier, which Lebanese officials say killed 13 people and injured 4, and targeted a Hamas training compound inside the Ain al-Hilwe refugee camp near Sidon. It was the deadliest Israeli strike in Lebanon since the ceasefire began nearly a year ago. The IDF says it used precision munitions, aerial surveillance, and real-time intelligence to minimize civilian harm. The IDF confirmed the strike, saying the terrorists targeted were actively preparing attacks against Israel and IDF forces. The army says the site was used for training, planning, and operational briefings ahead of attempted attacks on Israeli troops. The strike marks one of the most significant Israeli attacks on Hamas inside Lebanon since the start of the war. IDF sources say the facility hit had been under surveillance for an extended period, with intelligence teams waiting for the right moment when dozens of operatives were present. Tanzanians and Israelis attended a ceremony for the repatriation of the remains of Tanzanian hostage Joshua Loitu Mulel at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. Mulel was an agricultural student from Tanzania who came to Kibbutz Nachal Oz 19 days before October 7, 2023, when he was murdered, with his body taken to Gaza by the terrorists. The body was handed over by Hamas on Wednesday a week ago and taken to the Israeli Forensic Institute in Tel Aviv, who then made the identification. The handover is part of a U.S.-mediated deal under which Hamas is still to release 3 more bodies of hostages it has been holding on to. They have yet to return remains of Dror Or, Ran Gwili, and Sutisak Rintalak. Meanwhile, there are reports that the Hostage Families Forum may end weekly Saturday night protests at the end of this month. If the weekly protests are discontinued, the forum says its budget and resources will be directed towards a course of action chosen by the families of the 3 remaining hostages. We now turn to a special report from Central Israel, where specialized police units are conducting an intensive 2-day training exercise designed to prepare for the most unpredictable and high risk of scenarios in the most of the country. Israel's police are the first line of defense in the case of a major security emergency. Our correspondent, India Naftali, was on the ground as officers ran through a series of drills meant to simulate a mass casualty event in a residential area. Let's take a look.
Today, Israel's specialized police units are training for a mass casualty event in a residential area. It's something we hope will never happen, but something the country must be prepared for nonetheless.
What's taking place here today is part of a 2-day district-level drill bringing together some of Israel's most advanced police units, including Yamam, Yassam, and Magav. Unlike standard counter-terror training, today's exercise is built around unpredictability. Officers are being tested on how they think, how they react, and how they adapt when nothing goes according to plan. The goal is to force split-second decisions under intense pressure, the kind of moments that can determine the difference between life and death in a real urban attack.
We are here to train for a fast urban attack scenario. Israeli police force is the first responder on all the scenes. We know that from October 7th. So we are here doing dynamic training to prepare our people for every situation that can rush to us in the real life.
On the ground, the drills are intense and highly technical. Officers are moving through streets, maneuvering around parked cars, schools, synagogues, and residential buildings. This morning's scenario began with reports of gunfire, triggering a rapid search operation. Minutes later, a simulated red alert was declared, not routine situations. The scenarios are designed to be messy, chaotic, and real, pushing officers to use critical thinking, check their gear, and operate in conditions that are impossible to replicate in a classroom or a shooting range. Commanders here say that timing is crucial. After nearly 2 years of constant operations during the war, this is one of the first opportunities for multiple units to spend 2 full days training side by side. They are taking the lessons of October 7th and building them into the curriculum. Because, as they tell us, what becomes natural in training is what saves lives in real life.
In a disturbing development coming out of New York City, 22-year-old cult leader Mikhail Khishvishvili has pled guilty to soliciting hate crimes known as Commander Butcher from the country of Georgia. Mikhail revealed his plot to the Department of Justice upon arrest. ILTV's Devo Klein has details on this.
White supremacist and neo-Nazi Mikhail Khishvishvili has pled guilty to soliciting hate crimes and sending instructions to make bombs in ricin, a lethal poison, according to the Department of Justice. The notorious Commander Butcher now faces 40 years in prison for his crimes. According to his testimony on Monday, Khishvishvili was planning to distribute poisoned candy to children at Jewish schools in Brooklyn and other attacks against minorities. Mikhail, 23, was a leader of a white supremacist extremist group known as the Maniac Murder Cult, or MKY, a violent group that subscribes to neo-Nazi ideology. Shikhishvili was apprehended in Chisinau, Moldova, and prosecutors in the Federal Eastern District of New York Court. During the investigation, Shikhishvili admitted not only to plots against Jews in New York City, he was also linked to several violent crimes in the United States that took place between 2022 and 2024. According to the investigation, since July of 2022, Shikhishvili encouraged others, mostly through encrypted messaging platforms, to commit violence for MKY in New York and elsewhere. The messages included footage of beatings, stabbings, and other attacks, as well as efforts to recruit followers who have experience with explosives and biological and chemical weapons. Prosecutors shared images from the group showing men in Nazi uniforms and a masked individual holding a bloody axe next to a swastika. In his manifesto titled The Hater's Handbook, Shikhishvili encourages acts of mass violence, a book he distributed to new recruits. Sufficient to say, this is a man New York City cannot have on its streets.
Kol El Chabad is the oldest continuously operating charity in Israel. For over 200 years, the organization has been providing food, housing, and critical support to families and individuals in need. ILTV's Lidar Gravelazi was joined by Executive Director Zalman Duchman to discuss their recent operations. Have a look.
For over 200 years, Kol El Chabad has been a lifeline for those in need across Israel, providing food, medical care, and critical social support. Joining us now, all the way from New York, is Zalman Duchman, an executive director of Kol El Chabad, to share how the organization is continuing its mission of compassion and care, especially during these challenging times. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kol El Chabad has been serving the community for decades, well, more than decades. What makes the organization's mission so vital today?
Kol El Chabad is the oldest continuously operating charity in Israel, the oldest continuous Jewish charity, started in 1788 by the first Chabad Rebbe, Reb Shneir Zalman, and we've been working through ever since, continuously operating, serving the land of Israel, working from the diaspora, raising money within the diaspora to serve the land of Israel. Over the past 2 years, we've experienced the war, etc., and I think that what is most vital today is the continued long-term support, that we're here for the long run. During the war, there was an emotional outpour of support from the lovers of Israel, and obviously there's the flip side that we see very strongly. But those people that love and care for Israel have been there, outspoken with their voices and their dollar supporting Israel. And now that we hope that we're going to enter a time of quiet, that we have to remember that has to continue. And this is something that represents Kol Chabad specifically, that there's a lot of pop-up programs that popped up during the war, but now we're in it for the long haul.
Absolutely, for another 200 years and beyond. And what are some of the biggest challenges of those you serve that they're facing right now, and how is Kol El Chabad addressing them?
One of the most affected populations, besides the many widows and the orphans and families and the trauma, is the elderly. The elderly population, especially those people that this is not their first war, especially Holocaust survivors, that their childhood was during a war and the traumas that it affected them. People don't know, but there's over 100,000 Holocaust survivors still living in Israel. And this is really, so to speak, our last opportunity to see them off their last years in dignity. And we've been with this generation for a very long time. And I think it's it's a very vulnerable population as they age and as they get older. And even some of the most basic things of food is they are relying on non-governmental organizations to provide for them food. Non-government NGOs are much more effective and efficient at doing it, especially when you have non-governmental organizations working together in collaboration. We believe that is one of the most important populations that we focus on, especially with making sure that they have daily meals. And the reason why we could do that is because we have an ongoing connection to these, because we visit them every single day and we bring them food every single day.
So a beautiful program. And I want to ask, because I see that you've brought with you also a very special coin. So can you tell us about this coin?
I brought a special coin that was minted specially for Kol Chabad, a challenge coin. And it says on it, "Vayilbash tzedakah keshiryon." This is a verse from the Bible that God that he garbed himself with
Maybe
tzedakah.
hold the coin up so our viewers can see. Oh, you have two. Great.
I brought two. He guarded himself with tzedakah as scale armor. The scale armor, and the Talmud explains that just like scale armor, every single piece overlaps each other. And if it's missing one piece, it allows a vulnerability in that section. Same too when it comes to the challenges of helping the poor. No one person could take the entire responsibility on their own. But no one could say, oh, my part doesn't make a difference, because every single part is necessary. Just like scale armor, if you're missing one section, it creates that vulnerability. I think a unique gift that we would like to give to anybody that wants to participate in the food security project of helping the elderly, to feed elderly people. You could go to either on the QR code, I understand, on the screen, or they could go to our website.
So that's my question. If our viewers who are watching right now, if they want to help, I mean, what's the best way that they can do that?
So obviously, if they're here in Israel, we have Pantry Packers, a volunteer project where we have thousands of volunteers. But all those people that watch around the world could go to our website, or they could go to the website on the QR code, and they could sign up to be able to serve an elderly or Holocaust survivor. And the first 1,000 people to click this code, we will send them in the mail a challenge coin that says on it, that has it inscribed, "Vayubash Sakak Yeshuryon," for them being part of this scale armor, this protection of protecting the elderly, especially within their older age, in this special thing.
Incredible. So our viewers, you can scan the QR code on your screen now and donate and receive, the first 1,000 receive a special coin. Zalman, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 27 degrees Celsius or 81 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel. And you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.
Over these last days, this is what Judea and Samaria looked like. The Palestinian village of Jabba and Gush Etzion, homes and cars set on fire. Jewish youth running through the streets as IDF and border police try to restore order. Yesterday, the army demolished an illegal extension of the Mitzad settlement at Sur Misgavi. Hilltop youth clashed with our own soldiers, hurling rocks and injuring officers. And then, within hours, a group of extremists allegedly marched into Jabba in what the IDF itself condemned as a violent riot. This isn't an isolated incident. The IDF recorded hundreds of quote-unquote nationalistic attacks by Israeli civilians last year and says this year's numbers have already surpassed 2024. UN reports describe record-high settler-related violence and warn it is destabilizing Judea and Samaria. So tonight on Insider, we're asking, what is really happening in the West Bank? Who are these so-called hilltop youth? Is Israel failing to enforce the law on Jewish extremists, even as it fights Palestinian terror? And what are the consequences for Palestinians, for Israelis, and for our democracy, and of course, the international standing? To break it all down, I'm joined by Malka Fleischer, co-founder of the Female Security Initiative by Yadayim Shelanu, Naomi Khan, director of the International Division at Regavim, former Meretz MK Mosi Raz, and Anton Goodman from Rabbis for Human Rights. Let's get started. So, Naomi, I'm going to start with you. I want to talk about the numbers. The Defense Ministry says that there were 675 incidents of nationalistic crime by Israeli civilians living in Judea and Samaria in 2024, and that already there have been over 700 this year alone. If you look at the UN numbers, we're talking about more than 1,400 incidents that they are tracking in 2024, and continuing to this year being the highest level since the time they started tracking. Why is there, first of all, such a big gap between these two data sets? And second of all, what is the real picture that is happening on the ground?
So first, so that there's no misunderstanding, there is such a thing as violence in the Jewish sector in Judea and Samaria. It is abominable, it is abhorrent, it is illegal, it should be treated in the full extent of the law. That being said, there's a disparity of almost 300% between what Israeli official sources count as events and what the United Nations publishes. And it should be clear also that the United Nations figures have gone far beyond just a data set, and an incriminating data set at that. They have had real results, practical results on the ground for at least the past 2 years and before that as well. So we began to ask what the disparity is, and we tried to get our hands on the UN data. We had to actually do some very interesting moves to get that data. But what we found is that of the 8,332 incident reports that are listed on the United Nations data set, the vast majority, first of all, 2,700 or so were actually mislabeled. They were acts of Arab violence against Jews. And of the remaining over 6,300 events, 95 to 98% of them either didn't involve settlers, didn't involve violence, or didn't occur in Judea. And
so what is the number that we're looking at?
The number that we're actually looking at over a 6-year period was 833 incidents. About 50% of those were apparently incidents that were not instigated by the Jews, but were in response. And that's still a number, leaves a number that is far too high, and that the Israeli government must actually deal with every possible severity.
So, Moshe, I want you to respond to that. When you hear these figures coming from Naomi, over 800 incidents, and of course the UN numbers, again, well over 1,400, 264 they're claiming in October alone. That's an average of 8 a day. Do you feel that Israeli society then is underplaying the scope? As actually Naomi insinuated that the Israeli government is not taking enough action, or is it really like very exaggerated to focus on settler violence when we hear the numbers of Palestinian attacks?
But everybody deal with Palestinian attacks. In response, we killed 70,000 people. Yes, nobody deal with that. And I prefer to say Jewish terror because it's not only settlers. They get people coming every weekend from Israel too. Maybe it's mainly settlers, but it's not that important. And it's not just people who want to attack other people. It's all with purpose to take their lands. This is the reason why so many Palestinian communities forced to live in the last 2 years, but not only in the last 2 years. And all that is with full knowledge that the police and army will do nothing about that. I'll take Naomi's figures. How many of them were even investigated by the police, called somebody to ask, not even going to the court?
We actually
how many went to
that.
Prison? Very, very close to zero.
So let's give us the numbers.
Just one more sentence. The soldiers, nobody tell them that they have not only the right, they have the responsibility, and they can arrest people. How do I know? Like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, in the cabinet, chief of staff said that he doesn't have he cannot arrest Israeli settlers, and it is not right. If the commander of the soldiers don't know what is the purpose of the army, how can I expect the soldier on the ground?
So, Naomi, I don't want to take too much time, but give me a percentage. What percentage are actually responsible, mostly?
Every single one of the incidents that are reported by the Israel police or the Shabak are investigated. The rate of indictment for violence, nationalist violence or any violence in the Jewish sector is orders of magnitude higher than it is for indictment of Arab terrorism or of violence anywhere else in any other sector in Israel. So there's actually an overrepresentation and an overzealousness. Many of these indictments are eventually dismissed because they're found to be acts of self-defense.
Now, I do want to just highlight that there were more than 6,800 Palestinian attacks of various kinds that same year. And when we compare the numbers of Palestinian attacks, again, as you said, maybe they're being prosecuted more. Naomi's figures show otherwise. Anton, I want to turn to you. When we hear this kind of number, 6,800 Palestinian attacks, when people immediately bring up the Palestinian attacks and they compare the Palestinians to the Jewish attacks, do you think that's a fair comparison? Should we even be doing that? Are the Palestinian attacks rising and the Jewish violence rising commensurate, or are these two separate issues on the agenda?
I don't see why we should ignore either of these numbers.
I don't mean ignore them, but can we compare them?
Why should we compare? Why is it some kind of zero-sum game that they need to lose more people, we need to commit more crimes? It doesn't work like that. Every instance where an individual is harmed is a tragedy. And today, a young man of 30 years old was murdered in a violent terrorist act in Gush Etzion. Of course, we condemn this. We cannot live like this. But this does not stop me condemning Palestinians who are the victims of Jewish terror across the West Bank. And so the numbers game, and I have to say, Naomi, you change your tune quite often. A few months ago, you were saying that any talk of settler violence is a blood libel, as if anyone who's talking about it is anti-Semitic.
I have not changed my tune whatsoever.
And so, but now you're aware that there is the violence
we
and
have
the
never
criminal
denied.
activity.
No, we've never denied.
Exists. And let me tell you from the ground, when
violence.
you're talking about the data, you don't have the data sets. The Palestinians I met this morning who were attacked are not putting a complaint into the police. They're too scared to go there. And the police did not arrive on the scene. I've been on the ground and attacked by settlers, called the police 6-7 times, and they don't come to the ground. They refuse to come. This is an informal policy of the shy police as headed by Ben Gvir at this time. And so data sets quite simply don't work. What does work is human compassion, human rights, international law, and other safeguarding processes to make sure that the conflict does not devolve into complete anarchy and people are not being killed on the ground.
And I think that really respond, but I actually think Malka might need to respond as well.
I and Regavim, we conducted this research and we've never changed our tune. And the very first page of everything that we do says, yes, there is settler violence. In fact, there is violence in every human society on planet Earth. And that is not a question, and it is not something that we applaud. Quite the opposite. We condemn and call, and the question is whether or not this is a phenomenon that is indicative of some sort of loss of control or government policy.
And you're saying it's not.
It clearly is not.
It's clearly, how is it clearly not? Look on the last week on the ground. Look at the number of attacks. In Beit Lid, a dairy set on fire. In Deir Istia, a mosque set on fire. In Jabba last night, an unprovoked attack of 100 settlers. Oh, the situation's fine. It's not out of control.
Did anyone say that that was fine?
Nobody.
No, but I want to ask Malka a question.
Did anybody went to jail?
Yeah, was there one person arrested?
Yes.
No, no one was arrested for these events.
Well, it happened just last night, so we need to see what's going to happen with that. But I do want to bring up exactly what you're saying. Malka, I want you to actually respond. You live there on the grounds, and you're also a mother of a number of children, and I have to ask you exactly what Anton is referring to. What are these hilltop youth or these young settlers that are going out and carrying out these attacks? Because generally speaking, this is a younger generation. What are they hearing at home, in their yeshivot, in their WhatsApp groups that are encouraging them or even allowing them to go out and attack not only Palestinians, but also our own soldiers when their hilltop is getting dismantled? What is the education that's happening here?
So that's a very good question, and I have two answers to that. The first answer to that is they see that while Hamas is literally rearming itself in the same UN buildings that collected this data about settler violence, they are literally regrouping and regaining strength both in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. And as we're recording this, they are treating people in a horrible terror attack, which happened in Gush Etzion, and they see that too. So they understand very well, possibly better than anyone in the country, how important security is and how fundamental and how fragile security still is for our people. The second thing that they hear is, once upon a time, the communities that you came from were Zionist communities. They learned that you can, that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people, that we are here to develop a Jewish state, the normal basic things that Israel was founded upon. Now, you showed a video and you said at the beginning of your show, here's what Judea and Samaria looks like. This is what's happening in Judea and Samaria. That is not what's happening in Judea and Samaria. What's happening in Judea and Samaria is that kids are getting up, they're arguing with their mom about getting ready for school on time, they're getting to school, they're coming back from school, they're doing their homework, people are going to their jobs, people are getting married, people are buying apartments, people are gardening. That is what's happening in Judea and Samaria.
So, Anton, do you agree? Is this
First, I want to say I am Zionist, and the first Zionist Congress decided what is the aim of Zionism. Decided, fulfilling the right of the Jewish people to self-determination according to Mishpat HaKlal, according to the international law. What you're doing, in the way you left Israel and you live in occupied territories, and
the reason you don't live in Uganda today is because the Jewish people know that their right is to the land of Israel. Otherwise, you'd be in Uganda right now.
You have to learn what is Zionism. This is not Zionism. But
Zionism comes from the Jewish people's belief and knowledge that they connect to the land of Israel. I promise you don't believe more. I don't live in Israel. This is exactly, by the way.
Efrat is not in Israel. Okay. I believe more than you. Right. And you don't live in Israel. This is why you want tribunut. You want to annex that. So don't tell me who I am. Exactly. Now, all those details. When I was stoned by settlers, I tell the policemen there, you see, I'm stoned by settlers, and they did nothing. We know that. So this is why people don't go to the police. The police even don't have the numbers. Do you think Palestinians can go, the policemen tell them, go to Ariel, to the police in Ariel, and complain? They cannot go to Ariel.
Motsi, I want to tell you how grateful I am that you said this.
Can I just explain something? The data that I'm talking about has nothing to do with Ariel or the Israel police. We're looking at the data that is submitted to the United Nations by the Palestinian Authority itself. Are they afraid to go and report these things to the Palestinian Authority?
These are the right. This is
correct.
Probably the right.
And we looked at those numbers, and those numbers actually are insanely misrepresenting the situation.
The actual numbers are much higher than what was reported. And I can tell you that because I'm seeing it on the ground. And let me agree with Malka. A large percentage, the majority of the settlers are normative people who get up in the morning and whose children go to school. But also, when you drive into Efrat, the town that you live in, there's a major sign at the entrance of Efrat that says, don't hire Arab workers, only hire Jewish labor. Racism in the middle of the town, which goes by without anyone saying anything about it at all.
Every single Palestinian Authority area.
I was in Jaffa this morning with a Palestinian family who they tried to set their house on fire with children in the house. Where are your normative settlers to stop this?
I just want to say
setting houses on fire with children in them, and I don't see any settlers coming the next day and saying this is unacceptable. It has to stop.
So I just want to say how glad I am that this came out, because basically what we're talking about here is that we have two people who have spent their lives defending Jewish rights in the land of Israel, and we have two like Palestine bros, basically people
defend Israelis way more than you. Way more than you.
You go to the international community. You go to Europe and you tell them to attack Israel. We know exactly who you are.
The minute we started with settlements, the minute we lost security, what are you talking about? Thousands of Israelis were killed because of the settlements.
And Israel is investing hundreds of millions of dollars in.
Okay, finish your sentence and we're going to move on. Okay,
all you know is to incite. All you know is to incite. And then you say that you're not violent. You are violent.
You are violent. You just told me that I don't live in Israel.
I've been in the army way more than you. And you made only damage in what you're doing there with the occupied territories.
And we see it.
And don't tell me what to do.
Look at your face. Everything we need to know is written on your face.
We lost our security.
Okay, I want you both to stop. We're going to move on from this conversation to, well, not from the conversation, but from this point. I want to move to Naomi for a minute to talk a little bit about illegal building, okay? Because yesterday, One of what caused the incident in Jabba specifically, supposedly, was a reaction to us taking down the unauthorized expansion in Meitzad, which in fact, even Minister Bezalel Smotrich said should have been done because it went against his plans. So I want you to explain to me what is happening regarding illegal building, both on the Jewish side and the Palestinian side. I know Regavim tracks those numbers. What kind of illegal establishments are happening on both sides of the equation, and how is that impacting the rise in violence?
So I'm happy to provide the data. That is precisely what we do. That is our area of expertise. Before I do that, I want to just say unequivocally, there is no way, there is no reason, there is no excuse, there is no possible rationalization for, as a response to the demolition of illegal structures, for people to riot and damage other people's homes or take the law in their own hands or attack Israeli forces or Arab civilians.
Okay, but we are going to run out of time, so stick with the numbers.
103,000 illegal Arab structures are standing today. More than 103,000 are in Area C, the area under Israeli jurisdiction. Those are illegal Arab structures. There's also illegal Arab construction in the Jewish sector. That amounts to 4,211 structures. The 25 structures that were taken down yesterday were illegal structures and should have been taken down. And we believe that illegal activity damages everyone, takes the entire region to the brink of confrontation or worse, and we condemn all illegal activity. But 103,000 strategically placed Arab structures in Area C versus 4,211 structures in the Jewish sector, 85% of which are inside the municipal lines of legal recognized communities. So altogether, we're talking about approximately legal.
Illegal.
There is no law anywhere
no legal settlement
in the world.
There is no legal settlement.
There is no law in the world or interpretation of anywhere. Would you allow me to finish my sentence? There is no law in the world other than perhaps in the minds of certain people that makes Jewish settlement, Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria on state land or privately owned Jewish land illegal. You can say over and over and over again that Jewish communities are illegal, but that is 100% imaginary. There is no such law. The ICC can say it and the UN can say it and they can repeat it 1,000 times.
This is not a game of data, of watering it down. We're talking about people's lives here. You want to talk about settler violence, you want to talk about violence in the West Bank. We're not talking about data sets. We're talking about looking people in the eyes. And Malka, while you might misunderstand what Zionism is, and when you talk about the Uganda...
I'm pretty clear on Zionism, but
I don't think
you're going to educate me about Zionism.
The Uganda option, the only party that voted with Herzl was the religious Zionists to go to Uganda, because they saw that it was a need at the time to stop the pogroms against the Jews. Learn a bit of Zionism. But what you really don't understand is what extremist Judaism is doing and contaminating the Jewish people around the world. We have not seen this level of extremist terrorism coming out of our religion in the past. This is a threat to Jews in Israel. This is a threat to Jews around the world. Unless the authorities clamp down on it, unless people like you who claim to be normative respond to this violence, who call it out, go to the Palestinian villages and tell the innocent people, I'm sorry, this shouldn't have happened to you. Put your bodies in the way for it happening. This isn't just about the security of Israel. This is about what it means to be Jewish.
And we're going to only have 3 minutes left. No, I'm going to actually not allow you to respond. I'm sorry. We only have 3 minutes left, and I think that we're not going to obviously solve the issue. But what we are going to do is think about how we can make this better, because the terrorist attack today in Gush Etzion and the violent events that happened yesterday by whether they're Israeli extremists or the mainstream, whatever you want to define it, is definitely not going to get us closer to living peacefully with our neighbors or security in this country. So this is a lightning round. Everybody has about 30, 45-second maximum to answer. Malka, we're going to start with you. If you could implement one concrete step in the next 6 months to reduce Jewish-Palestinian violence in Judea and Samaria, more policing, education, legal reforms, you tell me what it is. What would it be, and how do you make sure it works? Again, 30 to 45 seconds.
I would change the education system in Palestinian Authority-controlled areas, stop the pay for slay, make it that all the incitement and all the horrific violence that Palestinian Authority society is taught comes to an end, so that they will stop posing a threat to communities that are constantly forced to defend themselves.
Mosi.
first use the police and the army. They have to know that they have to act against violent people. They don't know. The chief of staff have said that. Second, I would change education in both nations, Israel and Palestine. Israel did not agree that the committee on the incitement will sit, because we know that we have incitement in our education. And third, I think that we have to start to talk about peace agreement. We cannot go on with this war. In the minute we
I'm going to stop you there. We have to start talking about a peace agreement. Go ahead, Naomi.
You'd be surprised to hear that I agree with Mossi Raz. We have always called for the same thing: equal and universal law enforcement. That is why we have a government. That's why we have a state. We don't want chaos. It's not good for anyone. We owe it to our children, our grandchildren, on both sides, to equally and universally enforce the law, use the tools that already exist to create security. So we can.
All right, Anton, wrap us up.
Mossi says that the solution starts with the police and the army, but in fact, Mossi, you know it's much higher than that, because if you go to bed with dogs, you wake up with fleas. And letting Ben-Gvir into the government, into the coalition, was a deeply irresponsible and radical move. We need elections fast, and we need a mainstream consensus that we do not let extremists and hooligans to command our police force or the civic administration in the West Bank.
Thank you for your sentiments. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we do have tonight. I want to thank you, Malka, Naomi, Anton, and of course, Mossi, for being here tonight for this very important conversation. If you found this discussion on settler violence and the future of Judea and Samaria valuable, please like, share, and of course, check out the ILTV podcast as well for more in-depth interviews on related subjects. I'm Ayan Hoffman. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Insider.
As Israelis prepare for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, millions of shekels worth of food will go to waste, while thousands of families struggle to put holiday meals on the table. Leket Israel, the country's largest food rescue organization, is changing that, delivering fresh holiday boxes filled with fruit and vegetables to those in need. Today, we're joined by Joseph Gittler, the founder of Leket Israel, to learn more about their mission and how viewers can help. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the opportunity, and Happy New Year to all.
Joseph, why did you start Leket Israel, and what is food rescue? What about it can you tell us? Can you explain a little bit?
So I started Leket Israel because Israel today is a Western country, and we waste with the best of them. But unfortunately, those who've been left behind in Startup Nation have only found it harder over the years to make ends meet. So what food rescue does, it says we have all this wonderful, healthy, nutritious, safe food going to waste. That's really just an abomination. Let's make sure it gets in the hands of those who need it. So sometimes it's not so clear how exactly this food is rescued. So what we're talking about is cooked meals that never made it out of the kitchen. There's a fear of not having enough food, whether it be in the army or at a wedding or at a corporate cafeteria. And so there's always excess made. That's where Leket comes into the story. The same goes for produce. As a society, things happen, so farmers need to produce more than perhaps society needs. And then you have instances of low market price or ugly fruits and vegetables or order cancellations, which unfortunately are happening a lot today. Israeli farmers are struggling to send their excess crops overseas. And that's when Leket steps in with our tens of thousands of volunteers working in the fields, working in our distribution center, and those are all opportunities and ways to give us a hand.
Now, can you tell us about the team behind Leket and the effort that goes into collecting and distributing the food?
So we have a big logistics team. When you think of Leket, think of a not-for-profit logistics company. We have a team of over 150 employees in Israel, working with over 75,000 volunteers every year in concert to make sure that all this food that's available from hotels and corporate cafeterias and from farmers and kibbutzim, which simply would go to waste in the past, makes its way to those in need.
And what does it mean for families to receive these Rosh Hashanah boxes, specifically during this turbulent year?
Yes, so it's interesting. We always talk about the fact that Leket helps people all year round. If you're hungry in February, it's no different than before the holidays. But it's true and not true, because there's a pressure and a sense of honor that people want to be able to enjoy their holidays like all others. And once again, in a country like Israel, where so many people can live in dignity, if you're not living in dignity, it makes it that much harder. So we make extra efforts around the holidays to make sure that we have not just our normal produce and not just our normal cooked meals, but we go out of our way to make this year 65,000 additional boxes that we're distributing through our network of partner agencies. And we're also helping communities we don't normally help. So, for example, we've been getting a lot of calls from reservists and social workers who work with reservist families, mostly those who have small businesses or are self-employed and are really struggling to make ends meet.
Now, how can viewers help Leket make sure that no family goes without food on this holiday?
So I'd say two great ways to help Leket. First, if you're in Israel or coming to Israel, get in touch with us at leket, Leket.org. Sign up to volunteer. We need as much help as we can get. And of course, we always need financial help to expand our activities. Just one example, we're distributing for the holidays 2.3 million pounds of mangoes. It's more mangoes than we've ever seen in the history of Leket. And it takes a lot of logistics to make that happen. And so we would love your help. All the opportunities for donating are on our website as well.
Absolutely. Joseph Gittler, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you again. Shana Tova to all.
And today we once again have the pleasure of hearing from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, as she brings us the latest highlights and inspiring updates from the fellowship's ongoing work.
Shalom from here in Israel. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are two fellowship projects that you should know about this week. Number one, the fellowship learned that in the city of Tiberias, there were many people who were suffering from food insecurity. After 2 years of war, there were people suffering. They couldn't afford food, and they couldn't find basic food items. And so the fellowship opened up a soup kitchen. And so now, in the city of Tiberias, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is distributing over 150 food boxes every single day to people in need. Number two, I want you to meet Valentina. She's 85 years old, and she's just one of so many people who get helped by the fellowship. She's been living alone for over 2 years since her husband died. She has no one to visit her, no one to help her, and we learned recently she doesn't have enough to buy both her medications, to pay her rent, and to buy food. And every single month, a volunteer delivers to Valentina a food box with everything that she needs. This is saving lives physically and spiritually. Well, there you have it, friends. There are two fellowship projects that you now know about. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more updates on what's happening here in the Holy Land at the fellowship. Shalom.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Sivan Raviv, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. In a sharp escalation on Israel's northern front, the IDF has struck multiple Hezbollah and Hamas targets across southern Lebanon. In Atiri, the army eliminated a Hezbollah operative responsible for rebuilding the group's readiness, a clear violation of post-war agreements. Meanwhile, in Bet Leaf, IDF forces identified dozens of Hezbollah terror sites, including headquarters and weapons depots, hidden inside civilian homes and next to schools. Israel says these locations were previously shared with international monitors but ignored. Earlier, 2 more operatives were eliminated in Binjbil and Blida while attempting to rebuild terror infrastructure. And in a separate strike, the Air Force hit a Hamas training compound in the Ain al-Hilwe camp, a facility used to prepare attacks on IDF troops. Lebanese reports say 13 were killed. Israel says the compound was under long-term surveillance and targeted with precision munitions. The IDF says it will continue operating anywhere in Lebanon to remove emerging threats and prevent Hezbollah and Hamas from rebuilding their military power. Amid the ceasefire in Gaza, IDF forces operating inside the security zone in southern Gaza came under fire by Hamas operatives, a clear violation of the truce. No Israeli troops were hurt, but within minutes, the Air Force launched strikes across the Strip, hitting targets in Gaza City's Zaytun area and near Han Yunis. The IDF says every site targeted was linked to the cell that opened fire, emphasizing that Hamas continues to embed its operatives inside civilian areas. Gaza officials report at least 24 casualties. Meanwhile, in a separate operation along the Yellow Line, Kfir Brigade troops discovered an A-tube rocket launcher aimed at Israeli territory, along with Kalashnikov rifles, explosives, grenades, and military uniforms. The military warns the ceasefire cannot hold if Hamas continues attacking IDF forces and says it will keep clearing the area of terror infrastructure to protect communities in the western Negev in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the IDF-controlled security zone inside southern Syria yesterday, underscoring what he called Israel's immense defensive and offensive importance there, as talks with Damascus remain stalled. He arrived with senior officials, including the defense and foreign ministers, the IDF chief of staff, and Israel's ambassador to the United States, touring an IDF outpost, meeting soldiers, and receiving a classified briefing along the volatile border. Israel says its forces remain deployed up to 15 kilometers inside Syria to stop weapons from reaching Hezbollah and other hostile groups. Damascus condemned the visit as a serious violation of sovereignty, linking it to President al-Shaara's recent White House meeting, where he criticized Israel's presence in Syria. For now, though, Israeli officials say no security arrangement with Damascus is close, and Israel will not withdraw without a full peace agreement. Let's hear Netanyahu.
אנחנו מייחסים חשיבות עצומה ליכולת שלנו, גם ההגנתית וגם ההתקפית כאן, שמירה על בעלי בריתנו הדרוזים, ועיקר שמירה על מדינת ישראל ועל גבולה הצפוני אל מול גולן. זו משימה שיכולה להתפתח כל רגע.
The Mossad has revealed a major breakthrough with the uncovering of a wide organized Hamas terror network operating across Europe. According to Israel's intelligence agency, a series of coordinated raids in Austria and Germany led to multiple arrests and the seizure of weapons, explosives, and operational materials intended for use on command. Investigators identified Mahmoud Naim, the son of senior Hamas official Bassem Naim, as the key architect of the network. Naim met with his father in Qatar to advance the operation, linking the conspiracy directly to Hamas top leadership. The agency also confirms active involvement of Hamas operatives based in Turkey. Since the October 7th massacre, Hamas has intensified its efforts to build cells, supply lines, and logistic hubs across Europe, strategy that intelligence officials say mimics Iran and its proxies. The Mossad reports it has disrupted dozens of plots over the past year, crediting what it calls close and persistent intelligence cooperation with European partners. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East. I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching.
Today, we're diving into the viral image of Mohammed Zakaria Ayub al-Matuk, the child portrayed as a victim of starvation in Gaza. Now, you've probably seen this photo splashed across the media, but there's more to this story than meets the eye. But here's the kicker. While this image spreads worldwide, food supplies meant for Gaza are sitting unused, blocked by the UN and political red tape. So why isn't anyone talking about this? And why is the New York Times claiming that there's no proof that Hamas is stealing aid? Stick around as we unravel the truth behind the headlines and expose the misinformation surrounding Gaza's so-called famine. Welcome back to another episode of The Quad on JNS. Now, here this week, we are back with our panel. We have Ruthie Bloom, the host of Israel Undiplomatic and senior editor at JNS. Of course, we also have Shoshana Keats-Jaskol, the co-founder of Chokhmat Nashim. And we have Ateret Shmuel, who is the founder of Indigenous Bridges. Glad to have you all here with us for another week of the Quad. Unfortunately, we still have very heavy topics to talk about today. It's been a very busy week. We've seen a lot of accusations thrown around against Israel, accusations of starvation, famine, and a number of other things that we hear across the international media. Now, this was coupled at the same time with a lot of usage of photos that, in fact, were not from Gaza, or if they were showing something entirely different than what the media actually intended to show. In one example, there was a young boy who has cystic fibrosis who was featured in an Italian newspaper. In another, there was an example of a young Gazan who has muscular dystrophy, who was featured on the New York Times and multiple other publications. And this isn't to say that there is no suffering or starvation in Gaza. Of course, there are incidents of this. But what is the media trying to portray when they intentionally use these photos and these video footages that aren't entirely accurate of what's actually happening on the ground in Gaza? It's an intentional misrepresentation of what's happening. We do have also the New York Times claiming this week that aid is not actually being stolen by Hamas, citing, of course, anonymous sources. So we'll talk about all that and more here on the Quad. But first, Taryn, I want to turn to you about this whole misuse of photos. How much impact do you think this has on public opinion and how people are perceiving the war and what's happening on the ground inside Gaza?
I think it is a huge, huge issue. This is modern day blood libel. The repackaging of those evil Jews killing babies is these evil Zionists starving Gazan children. It's not true. It's not happening. In this situation, from a factual humanitarian standpoint, we have more humanitarian aid and food aid going into Gaza than any other conflict in the entire world. And it's the fact that Israel is providing humanitarian aid in the first place to the people who are actively attacking Israel and still engaged in an active war is an unheard of thing to begin with. It's crazy that this is happening, and yet it is, and it has been this entire time. But the intentional disinformation campaign to try and stir up hatred, animosity, and ultimately violence, and then justification of violence against Jews by painting Jews as whatever the world sees as especially evil at any given moment is exactly what legacy media is doing right now by using, at first they were using pictures from Yemen, from Syria, places where there actually are real food insecurity and starvation issues. There are many different countries in the world right now that are facing real famines, like Sudan, South Sudan, I think Ethiopia and Eritrea are still in trouble, Haiti, and Yemen, of course. And so a lot of the pictures that were taken at the very beginning that have been sprayed all over the media since October 7th, like before there even was any
Right, because they've
response.
been claiming there was a famine for practically since October 8th,
forever, which we know is not the case. In fact, that there's a really high instance of obesity in Gaza, and there's plenty of food that's in. There is an issue, however, from the UN's side, from the UN, which has been partnered with Hamas this whole time, and their refusal to distribute the humanitarian aid that Israel has been dutifully getting into Gaza this whole time. But even so, we are not seeing, and I checked, and I double-checked, and I triple-checked this the other day, because I didn't want to say anything publicly that could be used against me. There is no statistic evidence right now. There is no significant increase in child deaths, in deaths from starvation whatsoever in Gaza. We have trouble getting any real data out of Gaza because, of course, the people who are in charge of releasing any information about things like this is the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is just Hamas. And obviously,
but one of the things that's interesting I saw this week is that when people were talking about the casualties that are being reported from Gaza, one of the things that we've seen, especially in the past few weeks, is that the hospitals have been instructed to say that everyone who has been killed was seeking aid.
Yeah.
There was a report yesterday I saw about how several Gazans were killed in the pursuit of, receiving aid at a distribution point. And it said 1 or 2 of them were shot nearby the distribution point. Okay, maybe that could make sense. And the other 2 were shot in their apartment. So they were in their apartment or they were looking for aid. Like it doesn't add up. A lot of these stories are just not making sense.
Right. And of course, they also probably were pregnant children who were also press and doctors at the same time. But the real point of all of this is that the intentional disinformation campaign is specifically aimed at at making people hate Jews, and not just hate Jews, but it will and always has directly led to violence against the Jewish community. And that's what the legacy media right now is doing. In times of the New York Times, BBC, all of these major news agencies that people really trust and believe in have been running these absolutely false stories using false images this entire time. And we can see the impact of that. The rise of anti-Semitism globally is astronomical.
Now, how do you balance that with the fact that, I mean, there is suffering in Gaza? I mean, some of the things that we've seen, some of the incidents that have happened, even if it's not because of us, are horrific. You know, what the people of Gaza are suffering through, even under Hamas alone, aside from the war, it's awful. So how do we balance, like, fighting back against these blood libels with what is actually happening in Gaza? I mean, you want to take a stab at this?
I think that, you know, since the beginning, when we talk about genocide, what is genocide is intent. The Israeli government, the Israeli people on the whole, I'm not talking about the people who like to make a lot of noise and have no actual influence on what Israel does, but the overall Israeli does not want to see children, and I don't mean just see, they don't want children to starve. They don't want people to be slaughtered. They don't, we don't. The problem is when you're in a war, and an impossible war, because again, I'll say this again, if Hamas would say, we give up, the war would end immediately. We give up, here are your hostages, there's no suffering. But Hamas and the Palestinian cause has always been about the more we suffer, the more we get sympathy. The more we get sympathy, the more we'll receive from the world. Why? Because that's how they think Israel was created, right? Israel was created according to the world because we suffered so badly in the Holocaust, so they throw us a state. Right? So, of course, they're learning from that to say.
Which is, of course, not true.
But, I mean, sorry if I didn't make that clear. That is the narrative. That is the image that they're being sold, or that they've been sold for decades. And so the more we suffer, the more the world will feel for us, the more we'll receive, which is the playbook. Just look for a minute. Just think a minute. Look at they knew they weren't going to win October 7th. They knew, yes, every dead Jew is a good Jew for them, but so every dead Palestinian is a good Palestinian for them too, because that is what they are buying to, that's their commerce, like that's their commodity. So the more dead people, the more people care about us, the more we'll get what we want. And so that is their playbook. October 7th was just a way to get us to come in, and Israel did what it had to do and whatever. And they are suffering, we are suffering, and this is the quagmire that is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, that is the Hamas-Israeli conflict. And so, yeah, there's suffering going on, and it doesn't have to be that way. It certainly doesn't have to be that way. Hamas can end this war, Qatar can end this war, Iran can end this war because they're the overlords, but they don't want to. And so we're stuck saying, okay, we have to fight this war, and there's a huge civilian population that is in our way. And it is tragedy abounds in this world, and unfortunately, very much so in the Middle East. And we can only talk about what we see and let people know what's actually, as far as we know, what's actually going on, and try to parse that out. But people have to think.
Well, you know, there was, of course, a temporary blockade on all of the humanitarian aid going into Gaza from March, I believe it was, until May 19th. And then from May 19th, we saw that 4,500 trucks were approved by Israel to enter. They were on the Gazan side. We saw that at least 950 of them throughout last week had not been moved at all. These were the trucks that needed to be distributed. The aid needed to be distributed by the UN. Now, there was a lot of conflict from both sides saying, you know, that the other one was responsible. Israel was stating that the UN is refusing to move aid, actually brought a group of journalists down there to show the pallets of aid, water, baby food, all kinds of necessary supplies for the population that were simply not being moved by the UN because they refused to do so without being accompanied by the blue police, which is Hamas. So the UN actually asked for Hamas, which is stealing aid, to accompany them to distribute aid to the people. In addition to that, we see from the UN reports that 85% of all of the aid that was distributed by the UN from May 19th until last week, until July 23rd, was actually intercepted. Not all of it was stolen by Hamas, but 85% was intercepted, meaning it didn't get to the distribution point, to the people who needed it. Either other civilians took it and looted it, or Hamas took it and looted it. So clearly, the UN UN is unable to actually distribute this aid. Meanwhile, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has already distributed, I think it's 95 meals as of last week, 95 million, excuse me, just since May 19th. What is your response to everything that we're seeing? This, he said, she said, it's the UN's fault, it's Israel's fault. Whose fault is it, and what's going on?
Okay, first of all, we know that the UN is a bad actor. We know that UNRWA was actively an active participant in the October 7th massacre. We know hostages were held in the homes of UNRWA employees, etc. The UN is a bad actor. Otherwise, the UN would be happy to help distribute the food alongside the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And the fact that Hamas, one of its key demands in the failed negotiations, so-called, was to get rid of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Why would Hamas not want the people to be fed? As you said, Shoshana, and you also said it, that the whole idea is that Hamas wants pictures of starving Gazans and wants pictures of dead Gazans. And this brings us to the topic of Pallywood. Pallywood is the name for the Palestinian fake news movies, that's, Palestinian Hollywood. We've seen it throughout all the intifadas and the wars and the news outlets like the New York Times, certainly Al Jazeera, pick up on it uncritically. You can see a picture of someone who's supposedly dead and he scratches his head under his sheet and things like that. But I would like to now say why this is the spread of this horrible lie of a genocide and starvation is largely due to or abetted by Israeli journalists who go around the world, including on Piers Morgan. By the way, you were great on Piers Morgan. But, the Israeli journalists who go on there and say, yes, we are committing genocide in Gaza. They say it in Hebrew, they say it in English, they publish it. We have Barak Ravid. We have also Omer Bartov, who wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying, I'm a genocide scholar, and I know it when I see it.
And responded to on Pierce, by the way.
Oh, that right.
Yeah.
And actually, he's many years a friend of mine. Of course, we haven't been in touch in a while, as you can imagine. But after he wrote that op-ed in the New York Times, everyone picked it up. And not only that, everyone's interviewing him, everyone. And it's just going viral. So I'm not even going to blame him for making his career on that, because I've known him for decades. He's always been a leftist. But this goes way beyond it, especially since he actually is a genocide scholar. He's a Holocaust expert. That makes it even worse. But at least he is an Israeli, and he fought in the Yom Kippur War. But he lives in America. Oh. Whereas, and so, you could say Barak Ravid does it too, but we have our homegrown Israelis living in Israel. You turn the channels to these left-wing channels, and all they do is talk about that, how everyone is starving in Gaza. Some of them outright blame us for it. Others say, well, we're not doing it on purpose, but the Israeli government stinks, and therefore it's not doing a good job at countering it or countering the narrative. The whole point is that the lies spread, and this is one reason that I get kind of upset when people criticize the government for not having good hasbara, in other words, public diplomacy, countering these. Now, that may be true that we don't, but lies, but you see, lies travel faster than the truth. And one thing you have to say on Israel's behalf is that if there's a tragedy in Gaza, the IDF says, okay, someone accuses the IDF of, blowing up something or killing people in a hospital. It says, let us check. And it takes a couple of days to actually check the facts. The lies just go around the world. It's Churchill said, by the time a lie goes around the world, before the truth has a chance to put its pants on. So that's the reason that I say, and when you have Israelis who have platforms, major platforms, saying, it's true, we're terrible, it's a little hard to counter that from a government spokesperson.
Right. And I think that's something else that and I tweeted this yesterday because I just feel it so intensely. Hamas has created itself a win-win-win situation, okay? They win if they win if they lose, and they win if they die.
Yes.
Like, there's no losing. I got to figure this out as a mom, how to figure how to have win-win-win situations. But like they have created a situation where they win in every and we lose in every situation.
Yes.
Okay, so but more than that, I don't believe for 1 second that the Hamas, Iran, Qatar, Islamic Jihad goal is a Palestinian state. Not for 1 second.
Nope.
It's absolutely not true. They've never actually tried.
Nope.
They've never actually gone for a Palestinian state. However, they are very, very invested in making Jews hated around the world and destroying Israel. And that is what they are winning. You're talking about people, Israelis being kicked out of cafes in Vienna. You're talking about kids, Jewish kids, French kids getting kicked off a plane in Spain for saying Hebrew words. You're talking about Israelis not let off of a mono cruise in Greece by the local populations. They are winning this global
Not
war.
to mention the fire bombings of synagogues, the attacks, the murders of Jews in the
I'm
street.
just almost talking about the past 48 hours
I know.
that I know about, but yes, attacks around the world against Jews. And that is why, Ruthie, I have to take a little bit of issue with what you're saying, because as much as Israelis can say, and I feel it sometimes that Israel, but I don't really care anymore what anybody thinks, because they lie about us anyway, so I don't really care. And I think that's a lot of what the government, with the Hasbara. At the same time, we really can't say that. Like we can't. We can't. We can say it once in a while, but we actually have to take responsibility and say, yeah, we are on the global stage. Everyone else has maybe a tenth of a camera, maybe 1 day a year on them, and we have 15 cameras on us every 10 minutes all around the world. And we have to acknowledge our position in the world, and we have to do something about it in the best way that we can. I'm not saying we're always going to win.
This was also my argument. It's obviously a double standard, obviously. And so on its face, it's ridiculous. At the same time, if we're going to be able to implement our military goals, if we're going to be able to achieve what we need to achieve, we also need to recognize the other war, the Hasbara war, and the fact that the odds are against us and that there are double standards. So how do we deal with that? That's, I think, where, in my opinion, the government has fallen short. Multiple governments, not this one specifically, but multiple governments, because we know that they're going to say these things. We know that they're going to make up stories. We know they're going to use false photos. We know they're going to claim that the IDF did things that they simply did not do. It's not new. So because it's not new, and because we fought this war with Hamas multiple times, why are we not prepared for it? That's my criticism. Why is there not someone who is embedded with every combat unit of the IDF whose job it is to document? Not the sniper, not the soldiers, not the medic, the person whose job it is to document what's happening. Some of it will be internal, some of it will be external. But at least we know that everything we did, we have documentation of, not of the person with the body cam, but of what the unit is actually doing.
And we're also not responding in kind. We do not respond to accusations appropriately. This has been a major issue for a very, very long time. And I actually was speaking to one of the leading experts in psychological warfare about this. I was like, why is it that we can't get, there are people like me who really grew up inside of that anti-Semitic bubble. I was, and as a Jew, I organized for Antifa.
Well, you're doing it wrong. If you accuse Israel of genocide, you can be on Piers Morgan.
Well, so that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. You have, and that's one of the reasons why Jews who go against the state of Israel are given such celebrity status, because there really is this very complicated. There's this situation. Either you embrace your Jewish identity and you are completely ostracized from most avenues in life, work, social spaces, definitely activism spaces, and actually you face physical violence now. Or you're a good Jew, and you're a good Jew who goes against the evils of your own people. This is all in quotes, yeah? And then you are embraced by this whole Free Palestine movement, by the academic institutions that have become like the modern Nazi propagandists. And you're given celebrity status. The more that you speak out, the more outrageous your claims are, the more platform you're given. And for a lot of people, that feels like love and acceptance. And they don't have a connection to Judaism. They don't have a connection to Israel. They don't feel it. And so it doesn't matter to them that they're literally endangering the lives of the Jewish people all over the world. And that kind of propaganda, blood libel, has literally always led to violence, and it is leading to violence now. And when we participate in it, it makes it even worse, because people are much more likely, some of the worst anti-Semitic propaganda that I see it's taken from, what is it, that 972 magazine or Haaretz or like whatever, with some token Jew. And tokenization obviously is a form of racism. But we keep seeing our own people fall into these traps and not get it.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but speaking of tokenization, I wanted to circle back to what I mentioned before about the New York Times, which quoted this anonymous source, anonymous Israeli official, I think said, claiming that there is no proof of aid that's being stolen by Hamas. Now, before we discuss that for a couple of minutes, I just want to show the video that we have featuring some of Hamas's best hits stealing humanitarian aid from Gaza.
باقي لي مساعدات بسرقوها طخوني عشان بدي اكل اطعم اولادي. والموز موز والبلح بلح واللحم لحمه واليوم لفات رز ولفات رز.
So as you can see, there is plenty of documentation, even from Hamas themselves, of stealing humanitarian aid. And despite that, we have seen the IDF respond to all of these accusations and controversy this week by increasing the amount of aid, by implementing airdrops of aid from Jordan and UAE, as well as other countries, opening up more trucks to enter through Rafah. And the UN has, due to public shaming largely, started at least to distribute some of this aid. So things, I think, for whoever is innocent in Gaza are going a little bit better, hopefully, in the next couple of days. But I want to ask you, we'll start with you, Ruthie. What is the New York Times doing? What is with these token, soldiers or officials? They get always anonymous, of course.
Yeah, speaking of the New York Times and Israelis who go against Israel, Ronen Bergman is a New York Times writer. Notice also that the New York Times now has about 20 bylines on stories so that you can't pinpoint.
Who did
But that's another outlet like Axios that has Barak Ravid. We have foreign outlets with this Israeli experts. And in many ways, they are experts, and that makes it even more dangerous, as I said. But I just want to make 2 points also about information and disinformation. The government, I worked in that government office for several months. Governments are inefficient. There's bureaucracy, there's contracts, there's this, there's that, there's the other thing. It's terrible, okay? Unlike, for example, you, Yosef Haddad, who does amazing work. I've found
I think that I know him.
I think you know him a little bit. He does
I've heard of him.
Now, he does a fantastic job, but one of the reasons he does, I mean, aside from the fact that he's talented and really good at what he does, is that he is not constrained by government talking points or by government contracts. You can't do this, you can't say. Let me tell you, when I worked there, one of the things you have to decide is you can't tweet or something. So that doesn't help. All right, now, governments, I don't mean the Israeli government. All governments are inefficient as hell. Better to have private endeavors. So I'm not sure how that'll work because, people have to get paid. They have to, when they work, I mean, you can't
also
just say, do everything. Yeah, they need information. But I'm saying, there's an advantage to not having it. And the other point I wanted to make is, if it really had to do with the lack of hasbara, on October 8th, October 7th, we were massacred and burned and raped and kidnapped. And by October 7th at night, the anti-Semites were out in full force on Columbia and Harvard campuses. We hadn't even responded.
Yeah, but Ruth, that's decades. They're working for decades.
I'm aware of that, but what I interpreted from that is that actually that slaughter, you'd think counterintuitively, that slaughter enabled all of the latent anti-Semitism, or people who after the Holocaust were kind of careful not to be open about it. They could criticize Israel and say that's not anti-Semitism, etc. After October 7th, it was like the floodgates opened. And I don't mean, we have only another 2 weeks of legitimacy. I'm talking about immediately Jews are weak, they're being slaughtered. Now let's just jump on the bandwagon. And no amount of Hezbollah would have cured that.
I don't agree with that, actually. Well, there's some pieces of it that I do agree with, and there's some that I don't. I think that one of the things that we keep overlooking, and one of the things that I keep seeing that the government keeps overlooking, is that there really is this well-oiled, very wealthy machine that is cranking out in many different places, that's mainly Qatar, Iran, Turkey, Russia, China, that have basically spent the last 2 decades purchasing legacy media, purchasing independent media, purchasing social media, making sure that they've sprayed all the internet with bots everywhere. And that they continue cranking out back to back all of these outrageous blood libels all over the place. And they've also taken over universities, institutions of education all over the West. They've purchased land. They're taking over it, like all sorts of institutions. And there is a systemic and systematic disinformation campaign that is sort of like infiltrated almost all avenues of Western civilization, and there has not been any legitimate response or countering of that. And there are
from us, by the way, from the United States.
No, the United States has no idea what is coming to it.
Yeah.
And I keep seeing this, and it's horrifying. You know, I had one of my deputy director just came back from the United States, and he was saying that the only thing that's on the news is like some CEO who got caught cheating at a concert. Yeah. There's nothing about the Druze. There is a legitimate genocide and starvation and famine happening to the Druze in Syria right now. There are massacres of Christians happening in Nigeria right now. Hindus are still being massacred in both India and Bangladesh. We have the Copts who are still being like,
so many 26,000 people in Yemen have died from famine. 85,000 of them are children. Where's the campaign?
There are real issues from a humanitarian perspective. There are real issues that need to be addressed, and no one can be bothered to pay attention because everybody is so singularly, obsessively, compulsively picking away at this Israel-Gaza thing because of their latent anti-Semitism. But
not so latent anymore.
It's no longer latent. But there have been many of us that have been screaming for a very long time about how to effectively counter this growing movement years and years and years ago, and nobody listened to us. There was no resources allocated to organizations that were effectively countering these narratives. There were no resources allocated to actually like getting people in front of cameras that could have made an impact. We suck at like optics. We really suck at optics. And we keep letting things happen like the State of Israel, Hezbollah, all of the organizations that actually have money. And if we had been a little bit better at that, we probably would still be in a similar situation, but I think that we would have more backing.
Agreed.
Because we keep, like, if you think about, just here's a very simple example, right? One of the things that is done on a regular basis in order to continue to promote this propaganda narrative about Jews being white European colonialist settlers who represent like all that is evil in the world, especially to the left, is that they will always put in an interview, say like Piers Morgan or something, they will put like a beautiful dark-skinned Palestinian woman against a white-appearing man who has like emotional issues, and like and they will set up a situation in which you have this perception of asymmetrical power relationships, where it's like misogyny and racism and homophobia and all of these things that they seem to just try and be like pushing in this narrative, which are not actually at all representative of the actual situation on the ground in the Israeli people or the Jewish people as a whole. And this narrative keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and you can't get anybody to change this dynamic in front of cameras.
But don't you realize that Israel has so many people of different colors and all that? Don't you realize that Piers Morgan, for example, just as an example, wouldn't want an Ethiopian Jewish woman? You're right. You're right. And they picked somebody, but I saw something worse years and years ago. I remember people would say, "There's no good Hezbollah. Look at the Israelis. They have in a debate. The Israeli has a heavy accent. His English isn't good." Next to a Palestinian whose English was terrible and had a bad accent, and everyone is focused on the Israeli. But my point is that you're right, that we need to combat it. But I've heard Christians say Christians are being slaughtered all over the Middle East. And the Christians are also complaining, where is the organized Christian community? Why don't the churches that have all this money?
Yeah, but there's one Jewish state and there isn't one
No,
Christian
you're absolutely
state, so
right. You're absolutely right. But my solution, if you want to call it, it's not really so. I guess you could call it a solution, is that aside from all this, what always helps, the only thing that helps is victory. When we're strong, after the 6-day war, after Entebbe, after the beeper thing in Hezbollah, suddenly people admire us. And certainly Middle Eastern countries, they say, oh, Palestinians, but they really wanted us to beat the crap out of Hamas so that they could join the Abraham Accords without feeling that they attached themselves to the weak horse.
But the problem is that we put ourselves in a position in which we don't have anyone to answer in an articulate way anything. And I don't mean to go on Piers Morgan or to go on some TV show and speak about it. I actually am of the opinion that most of the Hasbara and advocacy should not be from government. Yeah. I turned down many government jobs. I don't want to work with the government, right or left.
Also,
That's not my goal.
Won't be taken as seriously because they'll say, oh, okay, she's a government mouthpiece, so of course
they say that anyway, even though I never have.
Right, exactly. Yes. But of course.
But what the government isn't giving us, people like me and other journalists who actually do want, they don't give us the answers. But forget about backing, financial back. I'm not asking for that. They don't give us the answers. If I contact the army or the government and I say, we're being accused of this, what is this video? Where is this coming from? No one knows.
I know.
No one has an answer. Oh, we don't know. We have to investigate. Or the worst, and this is something culturally that happens a lot in Israel, is people will say things that they don't actually know. And for me, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. But if other people don't know that, then this is what they report and we look like liars.
To be fair.
And this can't happen.
To be fair, right. Well, anyone with a phone, and everyone has phones in Gaza, anyone with a phone or Hollywood or whatever can make up any lie or make up any story. And how many can the army investigate in the midst of a war? I'm going to put that aside for 1 second because I think something that you said was really important for our audience who are not mostly Israelis and who are, global and a lot of people around the world. And I appreciate you watching. I want to say this. What starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews.
Absolutely.
There's a reason they're going after the Jews and delegitimizing what we have to say first. Because we're the only line, not the only, we are the first line of defense for Western civilization. And when they take us out and when they delegitimize us and when they say, you Jews have no idea what, meaning that really it's the Jews' fault and so we can take them down and it's okay, you're next. And I'm really not being alarmist. Okay, I'm really not being alarmist. This is just the way it is in the world. So there's a reason they're running after the Jews. There's a reason they're delegitimizing Israel, because then there's nothing left when they come for the rest of Western civilization. When they start with the,
you saw in Montreal protesting outside a church.
That's what I'm saying. And people need to really, really, really not look at us and say, well, they're just, really understand what's happening. Take a look and understand why all the universities, why the real estate being built, what is the end game here and what does it have to do with you?
I want to add to that a little bit because this is a conversation that I keep having with people and people are really not getting it. And I think that it is really critical for especially our Western audience to understand this. Why do we think that Qatar, Iran, Turkey, China, and Russia have purchased legacy media? Why do we think that they have purchased the academic institutions? Why do we think that they are changing the curriculums for kindergarten through high school through university? Why do we think that they are getting their narratives implanted into every facet of Western civilization? Why do we think that they're investing in people to change Wikipedia definitions? Because this is an all-out war. And when you look at there's this really problematic misunderstanding of the way that Islamism and colonialism works in the Middle East and North Africa. Americans specifically have this very rigid black-white racial dichotomy that prevents them from being able to understand, from this deep sense of white supremacist racism, that brown people are capable of the same thing that white people are. And that in and of itself is extremely racism, and people really need to unpack that. But one of the ways that that manifests is that they cannot comprehend that Arabs and Islamists are one of the greatest, most genocidal, most violent, brutal colonialist empires in the world to date. They have taken over huge amounts of Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, and they are actively, their entire stated open goal is global caliphate. Now, the nature of global caliphate is world domination. It is by definition global. And the reason that they are investing so much time and money and energy and resources and manpower into manipulating the public perception of the West is because they are coming for the West.
I don't think I could have said it better myself, and that actually does segue very well into our Scumbags and Heroes, which is our most popular segment here at the Quad. I do want to add one more thing about that, and that is that our discussion of starvation, all of this actually started on the PR front because the Muslim Brotherhood called, along with Hamas, on July 20th for a global campaign, a PR campaign across media and social media to accuse Israel of intentional starvation. We saw this across all the Muslim Brotherhood groups, including in the West, in London, in America, and Canada. So this was a very coordinated campaign from the get-go, as you mentioned. But without further ado, I would like to go to our Scumbags of the Week. Ruthie, who do you have for us this week?
Okay, I've got a twofer. Okay, these are two scumbags who deserve each other, and they're interconnected. It is Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte. In other words, Emmanuel Macron, anyway, I was going to choose him as the scumbag of the week for recognizing a Palestinian state and abetting Hamas by doing that. But interestingly, the other scumbag related is Candace Owens, who has exploded. Now she's on the far right. She's the woke right anti-Semite who is now, has been for months now, accusing Brigitte Macron of having been born a man. And she says she has proof, and that Brigitte actually was a boy until high school and had a sex change operation. Oh, she has been promoting this and promoting this and promoting this. And Brigitte Macron, who, as far as I'm concerned, she deserves what she gets, but okay. The funny part about it is that Brigitte Macron is now suing Candace Owens. And we brought up Piers Morgan before, who's also he's kind of, he leans towards the woke right, because he's not a leftist. He hates Israel from the right. Piers Morgan also said on his show that Candace Owens is a liar and that Brigitte Macron is a woman. And so Candace Owens made a bet with Piers Morgan for $100,000. And he said, great. And she said, boy, Piers is going to have to pay up. Anyway, so those are my joint scumbags.
I hope they bankrupt Candace.
Those people.
That was some really important tea.
Who cares? Get out of her pants, weirdo.
She's so gross. I hate her so much.
She's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I can't.
But I don't really like
Brigitte
what
Macron is
happened to her.
no great choice either.
It's not about her.
No, not about
Candace.
No, but the point is, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that lawsuit.
Yes, for sure. We'll have to have an update about that one. Who's your scumbag of the week, Shoshana?
Oh, my scumbag of the week is Rami Abdul. Of the people on the internet who make their careers off of anti-Semitism, Rami is up there towards the top. He's an assistant professor of law and finance, chairman of Euromed HR, and he's gross. And he tweeted this: the director of the Kinneret summer camp was arrested after insulting Spain. I'm sorry, are we in the medieval times? Okay. Insulting Spain, and 50 French Israeli kids chanted death to Arabs on a Vueling flight, assaulted crew, and spat on a passenger who said free Palestine, according to witnesses on social media. It seems this is the origin of the idea that these French kids on a Spanish flight coming back from summer camp were chanting death to Arabs and therefore deserved to be kicked off and assaulted and harassed, with the 21-year-old, I think,
Yes, counselor,
thank you, arrested violently, and you can see this on the internet. There's zero proof whatsoever that any of these kids chanted anything other than, from my understanding, they were doing some, if you've gone to camp, or even if you haven't and you know people who are annoyingly back from camp, they do all those camp chants like, Mashiach, now, or all those things that they say, which is just like camp stuff. And it's not death to Arabs. But of course, this guy has to take every opportunity that he can to blame the Jews for bad things, to justify the bad things that people do to Jews. You're a scumbag. You could join the other scumbags in the scumbag hell for all of eternity. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Taryn, who's your scumbag of the week?
I also have a twofer. Mine are the anti-Semitic propagandists that would make the Nazis gasp. Mainly legacy media. Organizations like the BBC, like NBC, like ABC, like all of the New York Times that continuously pump out intentional disinformation and anti-Semitic, medieval-esque blood libel, specifically aimed at like drumming up hatred, animosity, negative feelings towards Jews, and then ultimately violence, and then justification of violence against Jews. Well, they intentionally ignore real genocides and real crises that are happening all over the world where people actually really need help. Right now, there is an actual genocide happening against the Druze. We have, and I work with the Druze, we have information from inside that somewhere between 1,500 and 3,500 people have been slaughtered, and somewhere between 100 and 1,500 women and children have been taken as sex slaves. And there is absolutely not a peep on Western media. Not a peep, because everybody is so obsessed with Gaza. So obsessed with Gaza, and the only reason for that is because they can use it to hate on Jews. Now, I want to call out someone specifically who isn't legacy media, but I think is actually probably one of the most dangerous anti-Semitic propagandists out there today, Miss Rachel. Miss Rachel, I think, is even more dangerous than legacy media because people aren't expecting that she is sharing propaganda. They go to her looking for wholesome childhood education. They want, snuggles and nursery rhymes and songs. And what they get is literal Nazi propaganda, literal blood libel, the intentional and obsessive picking away at Israel in any way, shape, or form, the lies after lies after lies of poor, suffering Palestinians, the Holocaust inversion, the obsessive, compulsive need to make it seem like Jews are evil. And it's not to people who have if you're not expecting to be showered in propaganda, you have no barriers to it. You haven't built up any protection. You're not waiting for it. You just want, your kids to learn the ABCs. And somehow she is using her platform to target women and children, vulnerable women and children, to get them on board with her like Hitler Youth-esque hatred of Jews. And I think that she is remarkably evil.
But all right. Wow. No, I it's really true what you're saying. It's one thing if, you'd say, I'm an educator and I want to use my platform to raise awareness. Okay, so raise awareness of a lot of things around the world. Because when you only raise the awareness of one thing, even if you're not lying, which she is. Even if you're not, it creates a disproportionate idea of what's going on and versus the rest of the world. So if you're going to raise in a good faith, you have to be talking about everything.
Well, the thing is, she's published fake photos repeatedly.
Well,
she's published that claim, accusing Israel of killing 14,000 babies. She was up in arms about that, and then the video was suddenly mysteriously deleted after that didn't happen. No apology, no acknowledgement.
Because they said tomorrow 14,000 babies are going to die in Gaza tomorrow of starvation.
Yeah. Well, but also I think one of the most dangerous forms of anti-Semitic propaganda out there, and the most effective, especially within my communities, that it's literally infested the minds of most of the people that I know and have grown up with, are these propaganda narratives that it's not anti-Semitic to be against genocide.
Right.
It's not anti-Semitic to be against slaughtering babies. It's not anti-Semitic to be against murdering innocent women and children and doctors and nurses and press, because that's not happening.
Yeah.
That's not happening. That whole narrative is based on the premise that that is happening, which it is not. And so it's countering the accusations of the legitimate accusations of anti-Semitic propaganda before they even happen by pretending that what they're saying is a known fact, even though it's complete BS.
Right. And speaking of BS, my scumbag of the week, Mahmoud Khalil, could have been one for many weeks, but alas, I only got to him this week. He is involved in a lengthy legal battle with the Trump administration, who are trying to deport him for his support of Hamas. He effectively acted as the spokesperson of the pro-Hamas movement at Columbia University. And also was accused of passing out materials that were created by Hamas to students on campus. These are protests that had chants of, death to America and death to Israel, calls for intifada, a violent uprising against civilians. They burned American flags. They chanted anti-Semitic things. They harassed Jewish students. They violently assaulted Jewish students. They hijacked an entire building at Columbia University more than once. They injured security guards at Columbia University. So effectively, what he has, fueled is domestic terrorism and a domestic terrorist movement. And for that reason, green card holder Mahmoud Khalil was singled out and scheduled for deportation back to Syria, where he's from. This has been an ongoing battle. They temper what his lawyers are doing are suing everyone as much as possible in as many places as possible in order to delay the inevitable. I do think he will be deported, but this week in particular, he's my scumbag because he's been going on a media and political tour, meeting with different Democratic members of Congress, which is absolutely shameful for the Democratic Party, but that's a whole other issue. And going across the U.S. media, speaking about how terrible the situation is in Gaza. Now, why you have someone who explicitly supports Hamas, which is the biggest oppressor of the Gazan people, speaking about the Palestinian people and what's good for them is already on its face absurd. But in this interview with CNN,
just to be clear here, though, do you specifically condemn Hamas, a designated terrorist organization in the United States?
It's disingenuous to ask about condemning Hamas while Palestinians are the ones being starved now by Israel. It's not condemning October 6th, where 260 Palestinians were killed by Israel on before October 7.
Mahmoud Khalil refused to condemn Hamas. He's refused to condemn Hamas in any of the other interviews that he's done. And in response to the reporter asking him to condemn Hamas, he said, well, I think it's disingenuous to ask to condemn Hamas when Israel is intentionally starving the Gazan population. So again, circling back to the Hamas/Muslim Brotherhood talking point from July 20th, it's a disgrace. There should be no problem to condemn the acts of violence against Palestinians by Hamas. That doesn't take away from any criticism that you might have of Israel. But he's not interested in that because he's not interested in the well-being of the Palestinian people. He's interested in smearing Israel. That is his only goal, and that is yet another reason why he should be deported. So Mahmoud Khalil, you are my scumbag of the week.
Wasn't he also an undergrad for 18 years without ever graduating?
Could be, I'm not sure.
Wasn't he also like a very
not in America, though.
In Canada and the
By the way, I just would like to add one thing about your perfect scumbag. First of all, he also wants to kill America. He hates America too. But aside from that, one of the heartstrings, he was playing on people's heartstrings because his wife, his wife was giving birth and he wasn't going to be at the birth. And oh, the baby. He has not spent 1 minute with that baby because all he's doing is going around the country, like you said, meeting with Congress, meet on TV. I don't think he sees that baby very much.
Well, I don't know. And also, I don't know about his background. It could be. There are several activists who have done this that have exposed.
Well, I remember when I was in university, we had a plant. We had somebody who came in his 30s into undergrad, and all he did was organize for anti-racist action and the Students for Justice in Palestine. And all he did was basically make other students hate the Jewish community at Brown University. And it only occurred to me after finding out about this guy, whose name I don't even want to say, that was actually what was happening in my university. So this has been like an ongoing thing. This is part of this all-out war on Western civilization that is happening, where they are implanting people into the student bodies. And I think that that's what he was as well.
All right, well, to wrap up on a positive note, of course, we're going to do our heroes of the week. Tara, who do you have as your hero this week?
Oh, I actually, I have a few, but it's my team. The Indigenous Bridges team over the last few months has done the impossible. So our organization basically is an international Indigenous rights organization that brings leadership and representatives from different Indigenous tribal nations from all over the world together to work for our common goals and combat our common issues. And several members of my team are Druze who have family in Syria. And the Druze, like so many of us other indigenous tribal nations of this region, faced all-out genocide at the hands of Islamists, Julani's Syrian military. And nobody spoke up, and nobody stood up, and nobody said anything, and nobody tried to help, except for the state of Israel, who was then promptly condemned for it. But there was no one going into social media except for Druze and Israeli creators who were trying to get this information out there. But our team, my team of people from Native Americans, First Nations, Khoi from South Africa, Copts, Druze, Yazidis, Kurds, Assyrians, Arameans, different representatives from all of these different tribes, all of whom have actually experienced this kind of genocide themselves, all of them put their heart and soul into getting this information out there, into fighting for one another, into standing up for one another. And we're seeing these people are, we now have, we actually have a Native American couple here in Israel right now that are working with soldiers who have been wounded and PTSD. We have Copts in the US educating on the dangers of anti-Semitism and Islamist colonialism. My team has really stood up and done the impossible over the last few weeks, and I really just want to shout out to all of you because you're amazing. Indigenous Bridges, you are phenomenal, and I love you, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Shoshana, who do you have?
My hero is very personal this week. If you watched last week, you know that my person, Laura Ben David, passed away, and her funeral in Shiva was this past week, and I was very, very out of it, meaning I was there and not in the world. And my heroes is something that you guys can all be at home when someone you know is going through something. My friends were amazing, and they made sure that we had dinner and that we had Shabbat food and that I was never alone, even when I was alone, checking in on me, asking how I am, what could they do for me, just being a cushion for me, knowing that there's nothing you can do to change a devastating loss for someone else except be there for them and let them know that they're never alone and that you'll be their safety net. So my heroes are my people, my friends, who I will not embarrass by naming by name, but my point is so that everyone at home understands when someone is going through something and you feel like, I don't know what to say, there's nothing I can say that's gonna make it better, be there. I'm here. I'm here for coffee, for tea, for walk your dog, whatever it is, that alone is priceless, and you can be somebody's hero. And that's what I want to leave for everybody this week.
A very positive message. Don't think we would have gotten through everything since October 7th without the people in our lives who have been there for us through different periods that were particularly difficult, that continue to be difficult. But definitely an important heroes to remember. My hero this week is the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. This weekend, he held a gathering of different Iranian groups from across, different ethnic and religious communities within Iran for a conference of different activists and leaders in Munich. And during that conference, he also had a statement of unity that was signed by members of different ethnic minorities inside of Iran. And he also announced that over 50,000 officials, military and security officials from the Islamic Republic of Iran have actually signed up for the platform that he launched to encourage a defection for some of these people. So it was exciting to see things moving in the right direction. This is a very divided community. There's a lot of debate, a lot of argument, but nonetheless, it was great. Although not everyone is on board yet, it was great to see that there is significant support, that other voices and other opinions are given a platform, and that there is a space for that in the call and pursuit of regime change and a free and democratic Iran. So Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, my hero of the week. Ruthie?
Okay, my hero of the week is Ambassador Mike Huckabee, the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, who this week, he really, first of all, he does this a lot. He cuts right through the crap. He posted on X also about Emmanuel Macron's recognition of a Palestinian state and quipped. He has a lot of fun. He's actually quite funny. And he quipped, really, you want, where is a Palestinian state? It'll be in the French Riviera. And he called it Frankenstein. Instead of Palestine, Frank, F-R-A-N-C, Frankenstein. That's one quip. And the other, he attacked the New York Times and the UN and other media outlets. What he said with the UN and the New York Times and everything. Thank you so much for helping Hamas's narrative about all this starvation, et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, he takes these very serious subjects, and then he's very funny on it. And he said, well, why do you think Hamas doesn't want the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to be distributing the food? Oh, is it for humanitarian reasons? Yeah, right. Like Jeffrey Dahmer is winning MasterChef, is going to open a restaurant. So he's my hero of the week.
All right, he's done a lot of good work in response to the bad claims against Israel for many years. He was also at a TV show. He was a TV show host before, right?
He did, yeah, and a governor, and he's always been very, very pro-Israel, and he's also a funny guy, and a musician.
Yeah. All right, well, that pretty much wraps it up for the Quad this week. Next week, we will be back with our fearless leader, Fleur Hassan Nahum, who has been out of town for several weeks, but we will be back on track next week on JNS with the Quad. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Sivan Raviv, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. In a sharp escalation on Israel's northern front, the IDF has struck multiple Hezbollah and Hamas targets across southern Lebanon. In Atiri, the army eliminated a Hezbollah operative responsible for rebuilding the group's readiness, a clear violation of post-war agreements. Meanwhile, in Bet Lif, IDF forces identified dozens of Hezbollah terror sites, including headquarters and weapons depots, hidden inside civilian homes and next to schools. Israel says these locations were previously shared with international monitors but ignored. Earlier, 2 more operatives were eliminated in Bin Jbil and Blida while attempting to rebuild terror infrastructure. And in a separate strike, the Air Force hit a Hamas training compound in the Ain al-Hilwe camp, a facility used to prepare attacks on IDF troops. Lebanese reports say 13 were killed. Israel says the compound was under long-term surveillance and targeted with precision munitions. The IDF says it will continue operating anywhere in Lebanon to remove emerging threats and prevent Hezbollah and Hamas from rebuilding their military power. Amid the ceasefire in Gaza, IDF forces operating inside the security zone in southern Gaza came under fire by Hamas operatives, a clear violation of the truce. No Israeli troops were hurt, but within minutes, the Air Force launched strikes across the Strip, hitting targets in Gaza City's Zaytun area and near Han Yunis. The IDF says every site targeted was linked to the cell that opened fire, emphasizing that Hamas continues to embed its operatives inside civilian areas. Gaza officials report at least 24 casualties. Meanwhile, in a separate operation along the Yellow Line, Kfir Brigade troops discovered an A-tube rocket launcher aimed at Israeli territory, along with Kalashnikov rifles, explosives, grenades, and military uniforms. The military warns the ceasefire cannot hold if Hamas continues attacking IDF forces and says it will keep clearing the area of terror infrastructure to protect communities in the western Negev in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the IDF-controlled security zone inside southern Syria yesterday, underscoring what he called Israel's immense defensive and offensive importance there, as talks with Damascus remain stalled. He arrived with senior officials, including the defense and foreign ministers, the IDF chief of staff, and Israel's ambassador to the United States, touring an IDF outpost, meeting soldiers, and receiving a classified briefing along the volatile border. Israel says its forces remain deployed up to 15 kilometers inside Syria to stop weapons from reaching Hezbollah and other hostile groups. Damascus condemned the visit as a serious violation of sovereignty, linking it to President al-Shaara's recent White House meeting, where he criticized Israel's presence in Syria. For now, though, Israeli officials say no security arrangement with Damascus is close, and Israel will not withdraw without a full peace agreement. Let's hear Netanyahu.
אנחנו מייחסים חשיבות עצומה ליכולת שלנו, גם ההגנתית וגם ההתקפית כאן, שמירה על בעלי בריתנו הדרוזים, ועיקר שמירה על מדינת ישראל ועל גבולה הצפוני אל מול גולן. זו משימה שיכולה להתפתח כל רגע.
The Mossad has revealed a major breakthrough with the uncovering of a wide organized Hamas terror network operating across Europe. According to Israel's intelligence agency, a series of coordinated raids in Austria and Germany led to multiple arrests and the seizure of weapons, explosives, and operational materials intended for use on command. Investigators identified Mahmoud Naim, the son of senior Hamas official Bassem Naim, as the key architect of the network. Naim met with his father in Qatar to advance the operation, linking the conspiracy directly to Hamas top leadership. The agency also confirms active involvement of Hamas operatives based in Turkey. Since the October 7th massacre, Hamas has intensified its efforts to build cells, supply lines, and logistic hubs across Europe, strategy that intelligence officials say mimics Iran and its proxies. The Mossad reports it has disrupted dozens of plots over the past year, crediting what it calls close and persistent intelligence cooperation with European partners. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East. I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching.
I'm Ladar Greve-Lazi, and welcome to another episode of One on One, a special series from ILTV in partnership with Israel Bonds. In each episode, we sit down with real people with unique perspectives on identity and purpose who are choosing to make a difference and dive into the impact they're having along the way. Today's guest is a multi-talented force in the world of entertainment and a passionate advocate for Jewish life and identity. Jonah Platt is an actor, writer, musician, and producer whose work spans television, Broadway, and beyond. Following the October 7th attacks on Israeli civilians, Jonah launched his most personal project yet, his podcast, Being Jewish with Jonah Platt. Jonah has quickly become one of the most important young Jewish advocates reshaping conversations around Jewish identity. He's a proud supporter of Jewish education and summer camp and a dedicated investor in Israel's future. Quite literally. Jonah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a beautiful intro.
Thank you. So I want to jump right in and take you back, start from the beginning. So you come from a family with deep creative roots. Can you tell us how that shaped your path as a performer and storyteller?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents met in college, and one of the things that brought them together was their shared love of the performing arts. It's something they both had done their entire lives. They're both singers and actors, loved musical theater. And so as they raised their family, me and my 4 siblings, they imbued us with that same love of the performing arts. You know, there are videos of me and my siblings and my cousins when we're all toddlers until we're 16, doing shows in the backyard and performing in musicals left and right. So it's always just been in the water at my house, and it seemed natural to me that I would pursue some sort of path